the December 11th Port of Bellingham Commission meeting. How is everybody? And how are both of you on the left side of the room?
Shirley's gone to the left.
Is Brady straddling the middle or what?
One foot in or one foot out?
All right, during the meeting, there's going to be 2 public comment periods. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll do roll call first. Commissioner Briscoe?
Here.
Mr. Shepard?
I'm here.
Commissioner Bell is here as well. Thank you. Couple public comment period during this meeting. There will be 2 public comment periods, one at 4:30, another at 5:30. Out of respect for anybody who wants to speak, we ask that you hold your comments to 3 minutes. We try to hold this to 15 minutes. Is there anybody signed up for public comment?
You have a sheet there?
Lynn Murphy, thank you for the Christmas card, by the way.
You're very welcome. Good evening, Commissioners. This is Lynn Murphy with Puget Sound Energy. I just wanted to come this evening and just say thank you very much for your support of the 2 projects that I had asked for some support and a letter of support from. So the first one is our electrification transportation pilot project that we have submitted to the UTC, Utilities Transportation Commission. That is currently under review by the UTC. We're very excited about this project. This is going to allow us to support our customers in the electrification of their vehicles, providing more charging stations, off-peak rate charges specific to those customers, doing some low-income projects for electrification of transportation, multi-unit projects. The list goes on and on. It's a pretty large project, but we greatly appreciate the comments from the port in support of this particular project. The second project is the Green Direct project and program that the port has signed on with. A big thank you to Adrienne Hegedus. She has been a huge support in this project, and we've worked very closely. Again, this is a long-term contract with a developer called Renewable Energy Services, that is building a wind farm down in Lewis County, and we also have a contract with another developer, to be unnamed at this time, down the southeast portion of the state, that is building a very large solar project. It happens to be the largest solar project in the state. And the port has signed on with that, with a long-term contract. We're very excited to have you on board. Just to give you some perspective on how big and exciting this project is, we had 2 phases of the Green Direct project. The first project sold out with subscribers in 3 days, meaning other cities, large companies, REI, Starbucks, Target, T-Mobile, the city of Bellingham, Western Washington University. Those were all our first phase subscribers. It sold out in 3 days. Phase 2, which is where the port was able to come in on, sold out in 7 minutes. And in fact, we went back to the Utilities and Transportation Commission and asked them to extend our allotted amount of electricity or energy that we wanted to sell to our customers. So we have an average megawatt of 75 hours, and they were able to extend it to an average megawatt of 85 hours. So we were able to get a couple other customers that didn't quite make it into that 7 minutes. So it's a fantastic project. I just wanted to be here in front of the commission and just say thank you for your support. We're excited to have the partnership, and we look forward to working closer together as we move forward. Thank you.
Lynn, I've got a question for you. Can you remind me for the charging stations? It sounds like there's some for in-home charging, especially for the multifamily, and maybe some low-income project housing. And then is there also just general charging stations out and about on major, thoroughfares and parking lots and other
Yes,
locations?
that is part of the project. So we are going to have to do some market analysis to find out where we're going to put those charging stations for community use or town use, municipal use. But we're not sure quite where they're going to be. I know that we originally had a goal of putting out 40 charging stations per year for the next 5 years. Again, that has to be approved by the UTC, and we'll have to do some market analysis to identify where those charging stations will go. But yes, that is the hope.
And will those be the no charge to charge model, or are those going to be a fee base per kilowatt hour agreement?
There will be a fee-based charge to that. I don't know exactly what that looks like. I know that in the future, what we are hoping to do is tie those charges to, if you're already a PSC customer, tie that to your account. Right. So when you go and you charge, you put in a code, and it automatically goes to your your typical bill that you would have on your home. But there's lots of different ways that we're looking at that, but it will be a fee-based.
Makes sense. And given the huge amount of interest and demand for the Green Direct program, what can we expect in the future? And what are the biggest obstacles for you guys to roll this out in greater capacity?
So I don't know that I would call it an obstacle, but just having to help the UTC see the demand. I think that they see the demand, but the concern that the UTC has is what is the impact to those customers that are not participating in the program? So they have to verify that there is no unintended consequences to the customers that have not signed on. And that's just a matter of load, electricity on our grid and coming off the grid and who's getting that electricity. So there's going to be some market analysis to identify if there's any impacts. And we are hoping that we're going to be able to roll that out on a much larger scale beyond municipalities, beyond large-scale customers or businesses, and maybe even to residential customers in some form.
Great.
That may be a couple years down the road yet.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak before the commission?
I'll do it. Hello, my name is Rose Lathrop with Sustainable Connections, and I know you guys have on your agenda today the MOU with Corks for District Energy. I just wanted to come and give our support from Sustainable Connections' point of view for district energy on the waterfront. This is something that we've been advocating for about 10 years, I think is when we first did our white paper on district energy. This is the #1 greenhouse gas saving measure that we can do in the city of Bellingham to meet our master plan goals for the waterfront, to meet our climate action goals for the city of Bellingham, and the soon-to-be climate action goals for the port. We feel like this is a great opportunity. The pipes are in the ground, and now is a perfect time for us to launch this and see how this can attract the right kind of clean tech industry that we'd like to see on the waterfront. So just wanted to say that you've got lots of support from our team, and I hope that you guys pass it today.
Questions, Joe? Thanks, Rose. Anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, so we'll move to the consent agenda. Anyone wishing to discuss any items at length in those?
A motion to approve consent agenda items A through P.
Yeah. Question on E.
Is that B as in boy or
E as an elephant.
I had one on that one as well.
Okay. I have a question on F as well.
We start with E. What's the question?
My question with E is mostly about need for this design building in these design standards. It seems that we've been putting a lot of effort and resources into our harbor development in Blaine, and we've got some pretty good plans for how we're going to have that look. And I'm just trying to gauge what we gain from more money for more planning on this.
These design standards will be applicable to the mixed-use area, which is closer to the boat launch. It's called the Gateway Village up there. And you may recall when we went to get our web blocker permitted up there that there were some requirements for glazing and this and that. And the city of Blaine this past summer in June updated their city center guidelines, and the Wharf District design standards were attached to the old set. So they adopted a new set for city center and accepted that the Wharf District would still go by the old standards, which was what was part of the problem with getting our web blocker permitted with all these requirements. So the city of Blaine for quite a while now has been wanting the port to participate on developing a new set of design standards specifically to the Wharf District in the mixed-use area. So this would hopefully streamline future permitting processes in that area.
And so there appears to be some direct benefits to us in the projects we're hoping to achieve, having these updated standards. We're not solely being, gracious and helping Blaine with their expenses here.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, that was my question.
Any question on F? Did you have,
I like the way you slid that in being great.
I think we're often gracious, aren't we?
Yeah, my only comment on the same one was, I just think Blaine is poised to take off, so it's not less a question than it is. I think it's time to start doing something significant there, so I'm pleased to endorse this, yeah. That's all I had. On that one.
F, which is about the Waterfront District temporary parking lot, small works roster item?
Yeah, could you just clarify if this is, there's another item for, I believe on the action items related to this same project? And is this a cost share that we're doing with Harcourt for,
Yeah, so the items are related.
they're related, right?
Yeah, they're related, but they're not the same. So the item on the consent agenda was a small works roster that we issued a contract to Dawson to actually physically build the lot. The item on the action item is an agreement with Harcourt to reimburse us for their share of those parking spaces. So they're taking, I think, half the spaces, and they're going to pay for half the construction of those spaces. So that's why that's licensed to use is in there. The license is more complicated than that. If they end up selling spaces, then we get a share of that revenue because they're only paying for half the spaces and not for the land itself, so.
Okay. So this 123,000, that's the
Construction.
total cost of the
Correct.
construction, and then we will expect to get some portion of that back in a cost share.
Half of that back from a cost share, plus any revenue that they get from the parking.
Okay. All right, and when would this be completed?
It kind of depends. We're running up against the batch plant, the asphalt batch plant closing, which is right around this time every year. And if we can get some good weather in the next week or two or before December 15th.
Just like today?
It doesn't look good.
No, it doesn't look good. What's today, the 11th? Yeah, so we have till the 15th to get some asphalt down, which we need for the handicap spots. It's going to be a gravel lot, but the handicap spots need asphalt. So we're relying on that batch plant. If we miss the window on that batch plant, we have a couple options. One is to pay a fee to open the plant back up, which we may have to do because we have other projects that are running into the same delay over on Rotor here, our storage area. Otherwise, we wait till it opens back up in March. Our idea is to get this thing open up, I think, in early January, mid-January, something like that. So we're hoping to get the work done.
And
So a question, we have something going on, we need to get it open up in January, we would have to reopen that plant for? I mean, do we have some?
Well, there's more projects than just that one. I think if it was just that project, the answer would be no, we'll wait and we'll open up the lot in March. But I think if we have to pay, I think I heard $6,000 was a number thrown out. If we have these other projects, we're paying the $6,000 for them to open the plant anyway, we might as well get everything done. Yeah, we wouldn't let that be the driver, but some of these other plant projects might be.
And is ability to occupy the granary and to have people come use that facility dependent on this lot?
They need 9 parking spaces to occupy the granary. So yeah, they need 9 of these 88 spaces that we're building.
Okay.
Does any of those 9 have to be handicapped? Do we know? 1, okay.
So we need to mix enough asphalt for one spot.
Back of your truck's big enough.
I think so.
I got a shovel if you want to bring the water. We'll start mixing concrete.
I don't know how to do asphalt.
Old
We
school.
can do concrete.
Old school style. And we wouldn't get a very good finish. All right, that's all I
Okay.
had.
That was my question there. Thank you.
Anything else?
No.
Mr. Briscoe?
I'm good.
Okay, I've got a couple.
You getting bad?
Let me start with the first one. A, and I'm not going to read what I wrote because I'm going to be mature about this, Frank. I want to say that we're about to reaffirm Schmelik, Sitkin, and Davis as our law firm. And I think I speak for the rest of us as we watch what that law firm means to the state from a port perspective, and how much credibility that firm has. And I was going to be joking when I said this, but I decided not to. I think, in all seriousness, Schmelik represents us well, albeit overpaid, but I think they are incredibly valuable to this port as we reaffirm that. So I just wanted to make that statement.
Could I add something to that?
Please.
When I, when I ran for this seat, there was a lot of people, myself included, that had doubts about Schmelik, Sitkin, and what they were doing for the port. There was people that had disagreements with the company and so on and so forth, and I was formally asked to look into the company and see about changing our a law firm that operates for the port. And today I can say that would have been a grave mistake on my part. I have watched this law firm in action for us. I've watched this law firm in action for the state of Washington, the ports of the state of Washington, whom they represent. And they have done an outstanding job, And I don't know that we could hire the knowledge and the expertise that their team has at half the cost that we're paying them. Thank you for the job you do.
You were fine till you got to that point.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'll pass that on to all the lawyers and staff at our firm. They do the
Please do.
heavy lifting. I'm just the pretty face, as you can imagine.
I didn't set him up with that, I just,
And when you run this as a commercial, just know that the port gets a 10% commission on any new clients that you get from that ad.
There you go, I told him 25.
I also want to talk about the extended management agreement with the Northwest Discovery Project, the Marine Life Center, and I'm just pleased as punch that we've got a 3-year agreement to keep that in place. So most of mine are just comments.
Here, here.
I'm excited about the new leases with keeping Giuseppe's in as well. Since I lost Man Pies up in the center of Bellingham, now I'm going to hang on to Giuseppe's for all it's worth. And then I had a question on the liability insurance standards, and I will say that Tamara satisfied my question there, and it was really based, Rob, on whether or not $1 million in per person liability was enough per occurrence on those, because I think the days have changed, and that may be a little bit understated at $1 million. So I don't know if we want to look at that down the road, but I think for this one, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, certainly something we can look at in the next year or so, because I agree, $1 million doesn't get you what you used to.
This mine? Yeah, thank you.
And then the last one, we also had, we're designating the finance director responsible, and I just want to say what a great job Tamara does with her team, and just proud to be represented by them. So with that, I'm done with the consent agenda. Anybody else got anything else?
For the Marine Life Center, I do hope that when we look at the plans for the hatchery and continue thinking about the hatchery, that we really critically think about options for expansion of this project. It's a great, very small, tiny addition, and I think it's very well used. It's a great public resource. It's free. It provides good education, but we're a waterfront town that could have something much larger and more accessible.
They do a great job with the limited budget we give them, and all of our thinking is along those lines, that if we do a bigger hatchery program, we'd blow that up and make it bigger as well. So.
Yeah. Okay, with that, Diane, would you mind?
A motion to approve consent agenda items A through P.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Aye.
Shepherd? Aye. Mr. Bell as well. Okay, we'll move on to action items. Yeah. So you realize when one person leaves from the left side, that's half the crowd when one person leaves from the
We got
list.
to the good stuff and they're all running. What's up with that?
Other stuff got approved.
Oh, that's it. We got to prove our stuff first so we can leave and they got to stay.
A motion to appoint the officers for the Board of Commissioners for the year 2019.
I'm waiting for somebody to come to the mic. It's us. So we're going to appoint the officers for the Board of Commissioners to start 2019. And the motion is to select the president. And I'm going to nominate Bobby Briscoe to be the president. Oh, you got to move the mic closer.
I'll second that.
Okay. So that would mean that, well, we get an all-man left and an all-man right. So I
got
believe,
another
Michael,
person.
you were going to be secretary?
Yeah,
Correct.
we'll swap.
You were going to agree to
I'll do the vice president.
vice president?
But we need to make a motion to that effect, right? Or we need to, does
Can
it
do
have to
that.
be?
Sure, I can do that. A motion to approve the following officers for the Board of Commissioners for 2019. President, Commissioner Bobby Briscoe. Vice President, Commissioner Ken Bell. Secretary, Commissioner Michael Shepard.
Gentlemen, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No opposed? Now we've got to go to appoint the commissioners to serve as representatives on boards and following organizations, the Washington Council of Governments. Last year, that was,
So, Commissioners, last year, the Council of Governments for 2018, Bobby Briscoe was the primary and Michael Shepard was the alternate.
gentlemen, were you happy with that?
Well, I think does the president have to do WPPA?
No, anyone can do it, yeah.
If you guys want to stay where you're at, it really doesn't matter to me either way.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe
If you
the
got
way to
something
do
else you
this-
would like to do?
Let's take a look at these slates and see, do you see any changes being made on any of them?
I didn't
Do
catch
you
that.
want something else other than where you are?
I'd be interested in taking the WPPA one, if you are okay with that. I'd be happy to give up EDI. Swap with that if you'd like.
So are you wanting to do the EDI?
I hadn't thought about EDI.
Well.
I know you had
But
wanted to do it last
I did
year.
last time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what are we doing with Western Crossing?
I like being on Western Crossing because I've got some. I've
Then
got
you
a-
can't be there then. If you like it, you can't have it.
I got a dog in that, huh? But yeah, I'm more than willing to swap the WPPA for the,
Okay.
and then, as long as I can stay involved and be the secondary on that.
Sure.
And then I'll take EDI.
Okay.
Okay. Is that the only change?
Okay, so who's secondary on EDI? Me? Because you just took my secondary on the WPPA, so I got to get something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have a,
Did we totally confuse you now, Diane?
So here's what I've got, Commissioners. I've got, for the Washington Public Ports Association, the primary will be Commissioner Michael Shepard, and the secondary will be Commissioner Ken Bell. For the EDI Board, the primary will be Commissioner Ken Bell, and the secondary will be Commissioner Bobby Briscoe. For Council of Governments, the primary will be Commissioner Bobby Briscoe, and the secondary will be Michael Shepard. And then for Western Crossing, the primary will be Commissioner Ken Bell, and the secondary will be Commissioner Michael Shepard.
does that work?
Sounds great.
May I have clarification on the WPPA, where we landed?
So the primary for WPPA will be Commissioner Michael Shepard, and the secondary or the alternate will be Commissioner Ken Bell.
Thank you. Given those slate of officers, a motion to appoint the Port of Bellingham Commissioners to serve as the 2019 representatives or board members.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? So it shall be.
Well, we all have our crosses to bear now.
Eden,
So
you're gonna be
Commissioners,
captaining on this ship, I'm gonna.
Commissioners, when you show up on January 8th, 9th? 8th. It will be Commissioner Bobby Briscoe sitting in the middle, Commissioner Michael Shepard on to my left, and Commissioner Ken Bell on to Diane's right.
Musical chairs?
Yep.
However, I will not be, they just announced today that the 7th will be our dump day.
So on that day, Commissioner, who's the Vice President? Commissioner Ken Bell will be sitting in the middle, and Commissioner Michael Shepard will be sitting next to me.
Okay.
Commissioners, one other thing we should discuss since we're talking about officers, Commissioner Briscoe has work duties that bring him away. I think some of our documents, if okay by the commission, will start to reflect a signature line of the vice president or the president, depending on what that need is. And typically, it always has the secretary on there.
Yeah, I think that's prudent. I think so that we don't have to wait for him to come back for the
Just keep the
signature to
paper
be final.
flowing. Yep.
I'm in favor of that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Action item number 3.
A motion to authorize the executive director to execute a temporary non-exclusive interim parking license with Harcourt Developments Granary LLC for the Granary Building Project.
Thank you, Diane.
Now there's nobody.
Sorry about that. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Brian Gowan, Director of Environmental and Planning Services. This is an item that actually we already talked a little bit about, so I'll try to be brief here, but just in the way of background. It is an action item regarding the ongoing redevelopment work in the waterfront district, specifically the work that Harcourt's doing right now on the granary building. And just obviously, I'm available to answer any questions you might have, but just also as a reminder, we do have one of our reoccurring kind of overarching waterfront district updates later on as an agenda item as well. So if you do have questions that are kind of waterfront district wide, maybe we can table those until we've had a chance to go through that presentation, because that might address some questions you might have. But as we just discussed previously, this is actually an item that is consistent with the concepts that were built into the 2015 Master Development Agreement with Harcourt, where we contemplated that that projects may need access to port property by Harcourt as they're working through their process of developing individual projects. As you know, the port and Harcourt did not agree into a wholesale of property. It's actually on a project-by-project basis. So as Harcourt proposes a project, Port commissioners evaluate that relative to the sub-area plan and other agreements, make sure that's consistent, then approve that project and then that individual sale of that parcel. So the remainder of the property down there, although it's within the MDA boundaries, the port does have ownership and ultimate control over it until that's gone through that process and Harcourt purchases and acquires that property. So what we anticipated was there would be probably scenarios where a project maybe was built in phases, that sort of thing, where they would need surface parking, and they had anticipated that maybe the second or third phase would develop their permanent kind of structured parking, and then they could have an interim license like this to utilize port property while that construction of the permanent parking was done. In this particular case, it's not surprising, though, with the granary building is the first one to utilize this interim parking license, given the fact that, as you know, it's really the building occupies the vast majority of that parcel. There's very limited access to anything aside from foot traffic and some landscaping. It's bound in on all four sides kind of by immovable objects. You got Wacom Waterway on one side, Granary Avenue, Roeder Avenue, and then Waypoint Park. So there's really no significant space on that parcel for parking. And Harcourt does anticipate that they will be building permanent parking across the street in conjunction with a larger office development that'll have subgrade parking. But that's not been completed yet or even proposed in any significant fashion. So as we mentioned earlier, there's only 9 spaces that are required by city code because this is an adaptive reuse of a historic structure. But Harcourt obviously wants to have enough parking for their tenants to be happy and people to come and go out of restaurants, whatnot, that go into the granary building. So they started designing some initial temporary parking across the street. But we were also coincidentally underway with the development of this interim parking lot for use by park users, actually a turnaround area so we can open up the first phase of this road a little bit earlier and that sort of thing. And we worked with Harcourt to expand that parking lot up to 88 spaces, which on this figure you can see here is under construction right now on the kind of left-hand side of the figure and then relative to the granary building. So if constructed and if we can get the batch plant issues worked out, that'll be hopefully open here in January. So this license agreement is a temporary access for them to utilize that property. Since we did expand the parking lot for Harcourt, they've agreed to pay for 50% of the construction, which we talked about already as well. and they will also pay for 50% of any fees associated with any permanently allocated spaces that they get fees from granary tenants from. So we'll also get a portion of that revenue. Support staff recommends approval, and with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
I'm waiting till we get to the arch.
Okay.
Mr. Shepherd?
What's an estimate for how long we think we'll have the parking lot in use?
Well, we do anticipate using that not only just for the Granary building, like I mentioned, but also for Waypoint Park users, other park users. I think we anticipate up to 10 years. That was kind of negotiated with the city because we built this as an interim lot, kind of not to the full design standards, so up to 10 years.
And is there a crosswalk there at the location of the?
There is, yes. Yeah, right at the kind of right at, I don't know if you can see this cursor, but kind of right in this area, there's a crosswalk that crosses over. That's where the ADA handicap spots will be associated right next to the crosswalk.
Just remind me, will there be any street parking on Granary there for handicap accessibility that's even closer to the park, or is this the closest ADA parking?
There is ADA parking right next to this area as well. So there is on-street parking along Granary Avenue, and then there is one van-accessible ADA parking spot, similar to, close to this parking lot as well.
And Commissioner, just to clarify the time period, we expect this parking lot to be in use. For us, it'll be 10 years. Harcourt may not participate in this for 10 years because they may build their own structure, their own buildings. But when it comes to Waypoint Park and the pump track we're talking about doing, we want to have this lot in there.
Yeah, that's right. We anticipate that as soon as they build their permanent parking spaces, that this will be transferred out and this interim license agreement will be terminated.
You made it sound like you were
I
gonna,
had a question, it kind of clanged through the gears up there, and then it went, well, you know what, I don't know. So, I'm good. Really?
kind of lonely?
No, not really.
Kind of lonely up there? Was it?
Actually, I forget looking, at the plans and what we've done down there. This temporary lot, are we gonna have a lot somewhere close to that that's permanent for the parking once we're full-blown designed down? And I forget if we had that. Is that close to where we're at with this temporary lot?
We don't have designs on having a permanent lot down there. There will be requirements for Harcourt to do parking as they do project by project.
Okay.
Whether they can charge for that parking or not is up to them. So it's something we might want to consider, but no, we don't have any designs on permanent parking in the area.
So we didn't
We didn't carve anything
get
out.
close to that park for parking for the park.
No, the city, parking at a city park would be the city's responsibility, and they created some street side spaces, I guess, to take care of that responsibility. We didn't think they were necessarily sufficient for the early years, so we wanted to do more.
Okay.
And we do anticipate that as this is a small, and we can talk about this in the future, next presentation, but this is a small section of a larger park, and we do anticipate the city will build some kind of parking at the south end when they build the bigger southern portion of the park as well.
Well, and given the dollar volume for getting the plant back open, it's a small price to pay if they can get that leased up quicker. I mean,
Right.
it'll more than justify that cost,
Right.
head and shoulders. So, yeah. Any other questions?
A motion authorizing the executive director to execute a temporary non-exclusive interim parking license with Harcourt Developments Granary LLC for the Granary Building Project.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you,
No
Commissioners.
opposed, thank you. Action item number 4.
A motion to authorize the executive director to execute a memorandum of understanding, or MOU, with Corix Utility Systems Incorporated to develop a district energy implementation strategy for the waterfront district.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Mike Hogan, Public Affairs Administrator. Well, today I'm pleased to introduce Ivana Safar from Corix Utilities. This is truly an exciting day. We've, throughout the planning process for the waterfront district, we consistently heard from citizens and community stakeholders. We wanted the opportunity to do something better than, typical development or business as usual. And through the leadership of different stakeholders like Sustainable Connections, we had the opportunity to go and visit some of the most sustainable developments in the world, like Dockside Green in Victoria, BC, and the Bullitt Center down in Seattle, which is the greenest commercial building in the world. We also participated in the leadership for neighborhood development a pilot program and eco districts, and a consistent thing we heard and thought about was the opportunity for a district energy. Under your leadership, last year we installed 4 pipes under Laurel Street to provide the infrastructure to support a district heating and cooling system. And in April this year, we went out for a RFQ to look for a qualified firm to help us go through the different ownership models, further design, how we'd operate it, the regulatory, the permitting process. We had 6 qualified respondents. We had a selection committee that included Sustainable Connection, Puget Sound Energy, the City of Bellingham, Western Washington University, and we selected Corix Utilities. Through the planning process, we had the opportunity to visit some of Corix's district energy systems up at University of British Columbia, at University up in Vancouver, and at Dockside Green. And they're a terrific company that operates these systems all over the world. And Ivana's going to speak a little bit about their company now.
Good evening, and thank you very much for having me here. I have opportunity to talk a little bit about Corix and what we do and our approach to the project. And please stop me, because when I start to talk about district energy, I get a little bit too excited. So who is Corix? Like, we are a utility company. Our mission is to build a world of sustainable communities that aligns well with your plan for the waterfront district and the community. And how we do it by delivering water, wastewater, and energy utilities and services to our customers. Our focus is mostly on the mid-size towns, communities, and institutions. We are truly North American company. We have 2 headquarters, one in the US, in Illinois, and one in Canada, British Columbia, right here in Vancouver, behind the border. We own and operate 1,300 systems, water, wastewater, and energy in North America, work in 20 states and 3 provinces. The company has had a history of growth and stable revenue over time. We are backed by the pension fund whose main focus is long-term investments in infrastructure. And sustainable infrastructure, green energy is a prime focus over past several years and moving forward. We are talking in Canadian dollars here, but the company is big, and they own and operate, other than Corix, they also manage the infrastructure around the world, this pension fund, and they invest in them. Our experience, I think that's what is really interesting here, is district energy, what we are talking about here and what we have done to date. We operate mostly operate one system that we don't have ownership in. 10 district energy systems in North America. They include heating and cooling systems, and they are water-based, hot water, steam, or ambient temperature. That is more like a geo-exchange systems. We have a diverse portfolio of these projects. Some of them include natural gas, just a typical business as usual scenario, or renewable energy sources, as is the project I will mention briefly. In Burnaby, we are just starting construction on a biomass system up at Simon Fraser University. These projects are developed under different ownership models. We are not really focused on one. Really, it's always what is the best for the stakeholders and the project. We are very open and flexible in delivery models. How some of our systems, I should mention, are more like legacy systems that are there for a long time, especially those steam systems. Some of them are greenfield projects, and I would like to mention just 3 because they are so close to here that we have done over past 10 years in Vancouver or Metro Vancouver area. And how we approach development of these green energy projects. The very important component for us, and really to provide benefit to the project, is the phase approach, how we call it, is to assess the opportunity to build out the utility over time and match it as much as possible to development of the community, so that there is not significant investment right up front in case the market doesn't develop or there is a changes in development schedules. We implement interim plans that are typically natural gas based, and I think I had somewhere the picture just to show you this right at the bottom, that blue container. This is just a container style building that houses the natural gas boilers. That's usually for a temporary short period of time. And we now moved to implement the boilers that can be later used in the permanent plants. So it's right benefit so that there is a reuse of these systems. Distribution piping system, we are so happy to hear that there is already some in ground, but typically we continue build that distribution piping system from the temporary plants as the building connects and how they develop. The same with energy transfer stations that are located in the buildings. Benefits of this phased approach that we would definitely assess for this project as well are matching capital spending with development, as I mentioned. That helps basically with the rate setting for the customers. There is not a lot of capital put up front. Let's say some project that would develop the permanent solution, even green energy right up front, it's a lot of capital investment. And also there is a flexibility for future, because we may identify now that down the road 35 years we can implement this renewable energy, but as we progress and the society and everything that is around us, there may be opportunity for new technologies or implement various combinations of technologies, so that opens really flexible solution for the future. And I just wanted to mention example how this worked for us. There is a project in Burnaby in Metro Vancouver, university residential development that is on Burnaby Mountain adjacent to Simon Fraser University. When we started in 2008, it was identified as one smaller residential community that wanted to implement district energy and renewable sources. So we identified that, yes, it's feasible, it was going to be regulated utility, and we were implementing smaller, approximately 3.5 megawatt biomass facility down the road 6 years or so when development happens. While we were having this interim solution, natural gas, before the biomass was built, Simon Fraser University decided to evaluate the opportunity for them to implement renewable energy source, because they needed to be carbon neutral and wanted to be, that was their goal. And we started to work together, would it make sense to build something that could serve both customer groups? So from this smaller system, we are now building 13.5 megawatt biomass capacity that is going to serve both customers. So there are economies of scale, economies of scope, anything that we could implement and benefits both groups. So this is just to demonstrate how that phasing approach can change the project in the middle of the execution.
Can I ask what your biomass feedstock is?
So we are using wood waste, like the chips that are sourced locally in Vancouver area, and it's basically, it can be anything from shavings to just the urban wood waste and anything, because Vancouver actually banned wood from landfill, so we also are helping to get rid of this wood waste in the plant.
So most of it is actual waste product, waste food or waste wood?
No, not
rather?
food, just wood.
Oh,
like
wood.
Just, yeah.
Strictly wood?
Yeah.
And is it waste
strictly
wood? Or
yes.
are you sourcing,
No,
you have to
no,
chip new trees to?
no, not chopping trees. Like everything is really just the byproduct or urban wood waste, like from tree cuttings and chipping and stuff.
That's a lot of wood.
It is quite a bit, yeah. I think it's approximately 23,000 tons a year that we will need. But there is a company that, they are sourcing it locally or as a byproduct from other, like, forestry, and interior actually has quite a bit of wood waste. And so no tree cutting, for sure not. That was a big condition for the project. So this brings us to talk about this opportunity, and we are very excited to become part of it. Throughout the process, we proposed the solution to work with the board and your team on evaluating the strategy for development. And there has been a lot of work done already, and it's great to have a good start on some technical assessment of different technologies. But one of the steps, like first steps in our due diligence process, will be basically evaluation of the technical aspects of the project, starting with the loads, optimization, and selecting green or renewable energy sources for the project. The next step will be, and this entire process for this project is really combined with the go, no-go decision throughout the process. We don't need to work on the entire project up to the end if it's obvious from the beginning that wouldn't make sense for some of the stakeholders or the parties. We hope that this is not the case for this project, but we will be definitely vetting any steps on the project with the go, no-go decision with the team from port, as well as other stakeholders who will be involved in the process. After technical assessment, there is a financial and business analysis, development of the financial models, what will be the basis for developing the rates, how it will be developed, what will be the partnership arrangement between the parties, and what will be the approach, determining business as usual scenarios so that the rates are compared and competitive to the business as usual scenario. And again, go, no-go decision. If the parties decide to move forward, there is another step to discuss the business arrangements between the parties and how it's going to be developed. Key responsibilities of the parties, performance, what are environmental goals, and so on. Once the term sheet is developed, it's approved by respective boards and a commission to move forward to agreement negotiations. And this process basically includes what will need to be done. We can, at that point, develop agreements for the customers, like future customers or developers who will be owning the parcels, the agreements between Port of Bellingham and the city as needed. And then approvals. This is the important part to get everything approved as we are planning to have it. And then hopefully implementation, successful process leading to implementation that will start with design and construction, commissioning, and ongoing operation of the system. In terms of the timelines for this, we expect, hopefully, that the MOU will be approved today. So the December 2018 is really start of the project. And we are hoping to have the financial and technical due diligence completed by June 2019 and start with the business term negotiations and the definitive agreements between July and December 2019 with the start of implementation 2019. If there will be any parcels or buildings that would be developed before and the decision would be made that the project makes sense and would move forward, there could be some arrangements made so that those buildings are connected to the temporary solution, or they would have their own boilers that potentially could be then incorporated into the district energy system. So working together, our company's approach is always not to work in isolation. That doesn't work for us. We really need to have everybody involved and keep all parties and stakeholders informed throughout the process. Corix has partnered with Arab consulting company that is they have office in Seattle. And we are hoping for a very close cooperation with your team on the project, starting from data gathering through public communication and outreach. This is an important part of the project, as we learned from other projects, to keep the public informed about the progress. And talk about the progress and discuss the roles and responsibilities of the parties. And we hope throughout this cooperation we will get to the successful completion of that first phase to have the project evaluated and decided on the futures. Regarding the benefits, I don't think that I need to talk about them too much because you have decided about evaluating the project and you understand the benefits. But it's always important to work with the community, and we are there to do those parts of to have that role as well. We see the opportunity for educational components, work with the university, if there is a renewable energy implemented or when it's implemented in the future, to have some research programs. This is how we are going to work with Simon Fraser University as well. So there is a lot of opportunities to bring the benefits and showcase the project to the public and all stakeholders. And I think it brings me to the next step. So hopefully we can kick off the project with a meeting in January, have all parties meeting and deciding on the schedule, developing the detailed schedule. Like I highlighted the timeline and the months, but to have a detailed process with some milestones on the check marks on the project, and complete the technical assessment and a financial assessment, as we said, by July, and hopefully start business negotiations later on and finalize at the end of the next year. Thank you very much. Sorry, it took longer, I think. If there are any questions. Oh, yes.
Yeah, stick around. By the way, is this as excited as you get, Mr. Hogan? Because that's a grin.
This is really cool. So thank you, Ivana, and thank you, Sustainable Connections, and everyone that's been a part of this along the way, and thank you for the commission for moving forward on putting in the pipes in the ground to make this opportunity possible. I think if you approve this MOU, we look forward to working with Corix and keeping you informed and working towards the infrastructure agreement and the energy services agreement and the business relationship. We'll also be developing our relationship with community partners and Puget Sound Energy, Western Washington's Institute for Energy Studies, the city of Bellingham to look at harvesting the waste heat from the cogen plant, the waste heat from the sewer mains, working with the Institute for Energy Studies over the next year as well, and keeping them as part of this process. And then also working it into our economic development strategy. We've already had ITEC move and expand down to the waterfront to be near in part because of the district energy system and being part of that clean tech sector. And then Silfab, the largest solar manufacturer in North America, purchased ITEC, and so we hope to work that clean tech economic development component of this as well. So with that, if you have any questions for me or Ivana.
I have a couple. I like the go. I don't like the no-go. So could you, what would be a serious no-go? What would happen to no-go us on this? Please step to the mic. Thank you.
Thank you. So it did not really happen to us yet on these greenfield projects, but one of the consideration could be that, development may stall, or you decide, maybe later. So it can be on hold. The project may be on hold or can be developed in a smaller phases or chunks. We hope that it will not happen. What we found that is very important to really agree on that business as usual scenario and what is really the cost to the customer that we are comparing. District energy have a lot of benefits, and developers realize those benefits because they don't need to put all the boilers in their buildings. But there may be some resistance that is important to communicate with public and really to introduce the benefits of the system and what they really bring to people up front so that there are not surprises. So we also propose that it would be important to have some public open houses or the form of communication with the public or other involved stakeholders throughout the process. And that helped quite a bit in several of instances that we had in Vancouver. And the same with evaluation of the technology. Some may seem very attractive, but may not be financially viable. It depends what is really, what is really feasible, viable from financial and a technical perspective, and also what brings the benefit on a long lifetime basis, right? We don't evaluate the opportunities on a short period and on a short-term basis, but really a life cycle basis. So this is important to see that also the business as usual scenario is compared to, it's developed on a life cycle basis, and it's compared to the life cycle basis. So apples to apples comparison and that communication with parties and stakeholders is very important. So.
One more question, thank you on that.
Yeah.
Is it possible to use multi-fuel sources or energy sources for this project? Do they build it that way, or can you build it that way? So that if you want to use wood biomass, if that's available, you can. If you want to use natural gas, that's available. Yeah. So, and that can all be combined into one unit, so that can be used at any time? Or does it have to be a specific fuel source each time?
No, so very great, good question. And typically the renewable source is used for a base load. That means that it's not the full peak capacity of the system that is usually needed only for a shorter period of time in the winter. So you are using it for like the small capacity renewable energy, but you want to use it as much as possible because that's more expensive component of the infrastructure. And then when you need that extra capacity in the winter, you are using peaking. And peaking is usually through boilers, natural gas. But that renewable component may be a combination of various. Let's say we identify the sewer waste heat recovery has certain capacity, but not all what we could provide through renewable energies. So we can combine it with some other technology, maybe even smaller biomass or waste heat recovery from the cogen, and do the combination that makes sense and what is financially viable. If you would be asking like one plan to provide, or accept different sources, there are technologies. They could have wood waste, could have maybe I don't know, even food waste. That depends on the technology, but that would be really combustion technology. But if you combine, let's say, sewer heat recovery with the biomass, it would be two separate technologies, could be combined in one bigger central energy plant, but there is nothing that would stop us to combine different energy sources to deliver renewable base load.
Thank you.
No worry.
That's all I have.
Thank you very much for your presentation. You mentioned the physical place that we would have some plant. Where is this going to go on the site? Have we identified that, and have we marked off this space for footprint?
Yeah, Commissioner. So I think what we've talked about in preliminary discussions is initially there'd be a smaller temporary facility that would look like a Connex box, like at the back of a semi-trailer, which you could locate just about anywhere on the site and then move it. And then when you hit a certain level of development where you would actually invest and need a capital facilities plant, right now we have that location near the entrance to the site on Laurel Street to the just to the south of the entrance to Laurel Street. We have an area kind of reserved for that facility.
Okay. And is that a pretty common scenario to have that initial temporary semi-trailer that's using natural gas probably to take the initial development phase?
Yeah, I think it's a terrific strategy because it's a real low cost. You can size your energy source with the amount of developments that's there. It's definitely your lowest cost scenario for this type of development where you're starting out and you won't need that larger facility until you hit a certain level of development.
Yeah, I guess that's the biggest question I hear is this is a staggered development process. We're going to see some development coming online quite soon, but other development's going to be years down the line. And how is this model flexible enough to adequately accommodate that length of build-out timeline?
Yeah, and I think that was a good lesson learned from Dockside Green, which is a world-class sustainable development, but they built their full capital facilities plant at the start of development, and then they hit the 2008 recession and didn't develop as quickly as they expected. And so this is, so you save that larger investment until we actually have the square footage to justify that capital investment.
If I could just add to it, like also with these temporary plans, you have opportunity to stage them. You can expand one, let's say, with another, or you can even locate them in different location if different clusters of the buildings are being developed. That has been done at University of British Columbia, that they have 2 plants built because 2 different parts of the area were developed, and there was more saving to do 2 plants compared to building the long distribution piping system. So that optimization and flexibility to that temporary solution is there, and that's what we want to evaluate, what would be the best fit.
Good, and I'm pleased to hear that it's flexible enough to potentially accommodate some initial customers who might come along sooner. And I wanted to thank Harcourt for running the pipe under the road for the granary building, because that is potential to be the very first opportunity to deliver this benefit.
Yeah, and actually it was during the interview process, we were talking with Travis, one of her partners at Corix, the engineer, and we were talking about, we have a spot reserved, as I mentioned, for the capital facilities plan where we assume the temporary facility would go to. He said, well, we'd lose a lot of heat running it all the way over to if the first building is going to be the residential buildings along the waterway, we can just locate it right next to the residential buildings. So we've got a lot of work to go from here to there, but I think it's that type of opportunity, and especially in the early phases with the temporary units that we'll have to work through and explore.
Okay, last question, I promise. There was a lot of conversation about 5 pipes versus 4 pipes versus 3 pipes. Did we make I wasn't on commission at the time when we made that decision. Was it made correctly? Was 4 pipes the most common choice for your applications that you see?
Well, I think I'm going to mirror the best attorney in the state of Washington, and any commission the decision makes is the exact right decision. No, I think, we were, through the bid process we went through, and I think we were actually surprised. We thought the 4-pipe system would be a lot more than the 2-pipe system. And so I think Commissioner Briscoe is the one that pointed out, are we really, for economies of scale, we can get to a 4-pipe system, which provides tremendous opportunities for especially industrial development in our log pond and shipping terminal areas down the road. And it was, at that time, viewed by the commission as a worthwhile investment. And I think that, from my perspective, that was absolutely the right decision. I don't know.
Yeah. Preparing for a future, definitely, I think it was a very wise decision, and it always was planned to have a heating and cooling, so it's not new, and we believe that it will bring benefits to the community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So my questions are partnership related. You answered the fuel source question, and I'm just assuming that natural gas is the most sustainable, most steady state in the current configuration. So we'd begin with natural gas. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah.
It said in there, the city of Bellingham as applicable. What does that mean? And where is the city of Bellingham in this discussion anywhere?
Yeah. Thanks, Commissioner. Yeah, good point. So
You're welcome, Mr. Hogan.
So we've always viewed the city of Bellingham as a key partner. For example, if we're going to take waste heat off the sewer main, it's their sewer main. So we need agreements. They certainly have citywide greenhouse gas goals. They've been a big proponent of sustainable strategies in the waterfront district, and in general, they do the infrastructure in the waterfront district. And so they were on the selection committee for Corix, and we look forward to developing that relationship and partnering because we know that we can only do so much, and as a team, we can do a whole lot more. And so exactly how and where that relationship goes remains to be seen, but they've been strongly supportive, and we know that they have some of the infrastructure that we need to enhance and optimize this system. And so we look forward to developing and continuing that relationship.
And that kind of got to the core of what I was asking. So you don't see any roadblocks when it comes to needing the city to do something for us. They will belly up to the bar and come to the table when we need them.
I think in our general approach to the waterfront district, we've been really good partners, and each of us has a specific role to play. This is a little bit outside the box for both of us, but I think the opportunities and the benefits for the community are ripe for the taking, and so so hopefully we can continue to be cooperative and optimize that relationship and benefits.
And then what do we envision the role of Western in this discussion?
Well, so I guess two things. One is Western has 6 acres that they're going to develop in the waterfront district, and so we would definitely want them to connect into the system and be part of that. I think the greater opportunity is in their Western Washington, their Institute for Energy Studies. And so when we look at microhydro and the DE system and the solar plant and just you name it, if you're a student that wanted to learn about clean energy, you have a laboratory right on the waterfront. And by putting in this DE system, hopefully it won't just be pipes underground that nobody sees. Hopefully there will be education as part of that, and that students that want to attend and learn about clean technologies and developments of the future can be part of that, engage in that, not just with the DE system, but with the cogen plan and with the the Silfab solar and all the different resources that we have down on the waterfront. However, we're still in the early stages of that process, but long term, there's definitely tremendous opportunity.
Yeah, and you got to right where I was going. I do think from an educational standpoint, they could be great partners in this, in helping us spread the word. It's going to take more than just Rose to get the word out.
Yeah.
Not that I doubt your abilities, Rose, but I do think we're going to need a community-wide effort to make sure we get the word out and get the education to the people, especially when you talk about the backlash that you received in BC. We got an entire population that needs to be brought up to speed on why this is beneficial to everybody. So I think all of those partners need to play a role in this. So I think from a positive standpoint, I think what everybody's heard here is not whether or not we do this or we're now talking about how do we make this happen. And I think that's a positive message to be sending. So I'm ready to call for the vote if you guys are.
Let's make it
I'm off my soapbox.
A motion to authorize the executive director to execute a memorandum of understanding, or MOU, with Corix and Utility Systems Incorporated to develop a district energy implementation strategy for the waterfront district.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Aye.
Enthusiastic, yes.
How am I going to top that? That was a double aye. I'm the final yes, unanimous.
Thank you, Commissioners. A 5-minute break?
Yep. Yeah, let's make it 10. Yeah, because 5, I'm always late. 10-minute break, we'll reconvene at 10 minutes till 6. We're going to reconvene the Port Commission meeting. And as usual, we reconvene with a public comment period. It's a 15-minute public comment period, and there will be, we ask that you hold your comments to 3 minutes. And Paul, you're the first one up since you signed up.
Gotta tell a joke too, right?
At least one.
There you go.
Thank you. I saw you have on your agenda every week the public comment period, but I don't usually get here, so I thought I would before the end of the year. It's my last chance.
This is it.
But I also saw on the agenda the update to the agreement with the city and the county about economic development, so I might stick around for that. But just to take a moment, I wanted to encourage the Port of Bellingham to team up with others in the community to deal with what we keep hearing is a bigger and bigger problem, not only for people who live and work here but make a modest income, but their employers as well, who can only pay a modest income, and the cost of housing has gotten out of sync with what the incomes are for over half of us who live here now, actually. So there's a lot of reasons why it's complicated. There's a lot of disagreement about why it is the way it is, but there's less disagreement about what we can do about it. The Bellingham voters just voted 2-1 in favor of renewing the Bellingham Home Fund because it's easy to see that a little bit of money can be leveraged 8-1 or more, and the voters said yes. And so City of Bellingham will now have $4 million a year to use to leverage at least 8-1. That's over $30 million of matching funds to either build or acquire and renovate homes that stay affordable for people who live and work here. So there's a lot of agreement at the county that the county can find other things it can do to help encourage housing affordable inside the urban growth areas, not in the rural areas. And I think that there has got to be some roles for the Port of Bellingham to play as well. So in the coming year, I guess I'm offering what I know to help the Port team up with others in the community and look for good examples elsewhere of what a Port Authority can do to help address housing. If we look at housing affordability as an essential part of the economic infrastructure, it's just as important as roads, water, and sewer for an employer, that their employees can afford to live here, that the good employees can stay here. So I encourage you to think of housing affordability as part of the infrastructure of any healthy community. And then there's a lot of agreements about what we can do about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And I've said before, I think affordable housing is a key component of economic development. I think it's something that we can engage in. And you're right on the agreement. And the agreement comes from unlikely places, more and more commonly from business leaders, major employers in our community, from organizations that recognize the value of both expanding and retaining those businesses that we have, and our capacity to attract and bring others to our community. Housing is that issue that cuts across all those divides, and I think we've been hearing that message loud and clear, and we're excited to have folks like you who are willing to step up and help us chart that direction. So, thank you.
What he said.
Only times two, come on.
Anyone else wishing to speak at the open session? Hearing that, we'll close the public comment period. You see, you could have talked all the way through to that. Move on to action item number 5.
A motion to adopt Resolution Number 1380, updating the guidelines for compliance with the State Environmental Policy Act, or SEPA, and repealing related resolutions number 1244 and 1297.
Thank you, Diane. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Brian Gowan, Director of Environmental and Planning Services. This action item actually addresses the Port's compliance and administration of the State Environmental Policy Act, or SEPA. It's really the actual changes to our guidelines on this is actually very basic, and it's kind of a housekeeping item. And we update this guidance occasionally, but it's not on an annual basis. And this commission has never really been presented with kind of the overall SEPA policy and guidelines. So I thought I'd just take a quick moment to review what SEPA is and then just highlight what these proposed changes are to our guidance. So as a reminder, SEPA is the State Environmental Policy Act, and it really it dictates how lead agencies, whether they're ports, municipalities, cities, governments, Department of Ecology evaluates potential adverse impacts to select environmental categories from individual projects or like a large policy change like the adoption of the comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements. So a SEPA analysis has to be done on significant projects and policies to look at these different potential adverse impacts to these categories like earth, air, water, aesthetics, a variety of categories that fall into those. As noted, ports and cities and municipalities can be the lead agency in reviewing and making determinations on those adverse impacts and makes a determination. There's a variety of different ways that these are made. They can be everything from a simple checklist that says, yeah, no adverse impacts, and then the lead agency makes a determination of non-significance or DNS. There's also a mitigated determination of non-significance or MDNS, which basically says there's some minor impacts, but they can be addressed or mitigated. So like if a project takes out some native vegetation in one area, you can mitigate that by replanting it in another area. So that's an MDNS. And then there's the larger determination of significance, which then indicates that not that the project can't go forward, but that a more robust environmental analysis has to be completed. So completing an environmental impact statement or EIS. So those are the typical determinations that can be made by a lead agency. We did adopt the guidelines and have been doing that since 1984, but the port really doesn't do a whole lot of SEPA determinations. We typically default to the jurisdiction that we're working in. So the county, if we're doing a project in the county or in the city, typically the city or county makes those, we have them be the lead agency. We can be the lead agency like when we adopt our comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements. There are other scenarios such in the waterfront district where we have an agreement with the city on how we manage SEPA, and I'll talk about that in a minute here as well. So that's but we do have flexibility where we can do SEPA determinations on our own projects as well. So this resolution really updates the SEPA policy only in a couple ways. One is that there have been significant changes in personnel and positions. We've combined the Environmental and Planning Division recently, so some of the titles of the responsible official to make those determinations has changed. So we're redefining the port official, which will be the Director of Environmental and Planning Services, which is myself, would be the SEPA responsible official. And then the other thing that this does is that it adds an optional comment period. There's that was not already in there for some particular types of reports that are SEPA related. In this case, like the EIS that for the waterfront district that has been issued, there's a supplemental EIS that can be issued, and then there's sometimes a smaller report called an addendum. And in this case, the addendums typically are not required to go out for public review and comment. They document small modifications and changes. But in the case of the waterfront district, we're preparing to issue the addendum to the EIS that will document the changes related to the park layouts, the street layouts, the view corridor modifications. It's not large enough that needed to go through a whole nother analysis, but the addendum then documents that, and we could just issue that as a final. But in the spirit of transparency and kind of the public involvement that we've really done a fairly good job, I think, over this process with the sub-area plan, we wanted to issue that for public review and comment. But our current policy really actually didn't allow us to have that flexibility. So this addition adds the option to issue addendums for public review and comment. And pending commission approval of this change, we do plan on issuing, and we'll talk about this at the next waterfront update here. We do plan on issuing that waterfront EIS addendum here in the next couple of weeks for public comment. So with that, staff recommends approval. The SEPA process is fairly legal heavy, and so if we want to talk about the details of what SEPA involves, I might employ our legal counsel as well to answer any questions on that. But anything you've got?
I have none.
So we're going to have a new title for you?
Well, some of the
I throw a couple out, King Brian or Oh Great One?
Nothing like that, no. My current title is what is being revised in the guidance to be used.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just teasing, Brian.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It sounds like this is mostly housekeeping.
Yes.
It's fairly procedural, and we don't trigger a lot of these. At WPPA, there was a lot of discussion actually about SEPA and about the life cycle review, particularly around carbon.
Right.
That is being triggered in greater quantity and greater frequency because of some rule changes at the state. Do we, and for some ports, this is a big deal for them and something that they intend to put some lobbying pressure on in Olympia on to find some rulemaking capacity out of ecology to make some clarifications. Do you see us having to do that type of work for our upcoming SEPA permits?
Not with the ones immediately in front of us. Those are significant issues, usually wrapped around a very large projects that have really kind of much larger footprint kind of impacts.
These are methanol plants, these are export terminals.
Right.
These are big and particularly carbon-intensive operations.
Exactly. I think that, so right in front of the Port of Bellingham projects, not likely. I do think that ports have an interest in if tracking those life cycle, the requirements on those life cycle impacts, especially for anything that's transportation related. We do have international cargo shipments, that sort of thing, that we need to look at that. But nothing that's right in front of us right now. But we are tracking the WPPA's issues with it as well.
Okay.
That's it for me. You have nothing more? Let's move the motion.
A motion to adopt Resolution 1380, updating guidelines for compliance with the State Environmental Policy Act, or SEPA, and repealing related resolutions 1244 and 1297.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Aye.
Commissioner Shepard? Aye. Commissioner Bell is also an aye.
Great. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thanks for the work on that, Brian. Action item number 6.
Motion to authorize the Executive Director to sign an addendum to the interlocal agreement between the Port of Bellingham, City of Bellingham, and Whatcom County regarding a coordinated approach to funding and contracting with economic development service providers.
Thank you, Diane. Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Mitchner, Economic Development Specialist, Port of Bellingham. This addendum is to the existing tri-funder agreement we currently have, and what this one does is sort of bring everything into alignment, if you will. 3 main points that we'll hit. It realizes that we will now have a 4-person, fully staffed Economic Development Department going forward with the Director, 2 Economic Development Specialists, and then a Research and Coordination Communication person who's coming on board soon. So we're going to be able to do that, which will allow us to do a bunch of other stuff. I'll touch on one of those here in a bit. It will just updates the funding cycle that we are in. We had a 2017, 18, 19 3-year agreement. And with the bringing the staff up to 4 people and the funding changes that are going forth there, we're saying let's recognize that today and go forward then with 2019, 20, and 21 to fund for 3 years going forward. As a note, the county council did approve this last week, so they've passed it, and it's moving through there, and the city of Bellingham's looking to do the same thing
Quick
soon.
question on that. Did they pass the 3-year?
Yes, they did.
Just a 1 year?
Correct, Commissioner, yes, they did. And then the last piece that is really great about this, it allows us to break out special projects, if you will, going forward, and that's where this research and communication person is going to come in to play a key role. For example, in the 2019 budget going forward, we're looking at a study on Cherry Point. We're looking at the broadband study that CURB is helping fund and getting broadband out into the community, and then also an I-5 infrastructure study. So we have finally got a real good handle on what infrastructure we have in the community, in the county, and where we can look at development going forward and what makes sense for the community and for the business, the general community and the business community as well. So with that, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to address those.
So just to clarify on Ken's question, that the county did agree to a 3-year funding cycle, but the 200K is a special project just for this.
That is correct,
next year?
Commissioner. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and on that note, the special projects piece, the way it is in this addendum, that as we do the work throughout the year, and if we see a need for a new special project, if you will, going forward, that will be brought up in the 4th quarter of that year, so it would be this time next year, if you will, and to ask for approval to specially fund whatever that might be. So it's not an ongoing thing, but it's as needed. Yes.
And can you just recap that $100,000 that we allocate from the Small Cities Fund? Is that, I know we got a little bit of feedback on how that was being allocated, and I think that was based on a temporary use of funds. Is that different from this permanent 3-year process?
It is. We have the 100,000 in here in
Yeah.
the numbers, but how we allocate that is subject to the Port Commission approval. And historically, we've let the small cities duke it out over that. They've come to you with a recommendation, and we've just adopted that recommendation. For the next year, what we'd like to do for the 2019 funds is we'd like to commit that to the Berry Lab at the fairgrounds that's being developed. And most of the small city mayors have agreed to that. And what they did, when we were talking to them about that Berry Lab, what came to light is they'd like to see the funds dispersed a little differently. Typically, it's been 10,000 to one city, 15,000 to another. And they think it'd be more beneficial if they took turns and took it in big chunks and could do bigger projects with it. So I think our recommendation after 2019 will be to go with that. But for 2019, the staff's recommendation is going to be, and we'll bring this forward to you for approval at a later date, but our recommendation is going to be to fund the Berry Lab.
Okay. And then those subsequent years, that money will be available for the small cities.
Correct.
And we'll encourage them to use it for big bang initiatives.
Correct. Economic development, big bang initiatives. Yep.
We can all think of a list of the projects that we don't want it to go on that list, but thank you. Okay.
Questions? Okay, yeah, my only comment is I'm supportive. My only request going forward is that we do a little bit better job getting the word out as to not only how well we do with business retention, as well as in the future of what we're bringing to the table. I just think that PR piece could be expanded, just so that everybody understands what we're doing here at the port. And we've retained a number of jobs, and that we need to take credit for that work when it is done, because nobody else is going to sing those praises. But we're certainly getting a good bang for our buck, and I feel good about moving this forward. Okay.
A motion to authorize the executive director to sign an addendum to the interlocal agreement between the Port of Bellingham, City of Bellingham, and Whatcom County regarding a coordinated approach to funding and contracting with economic development service providers.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Aye.
Commissioner Shepard?
Aye.
Commissioner Bell is also an aye, so thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, for those of you in the audience, we're now going to recess the Port Commission meeting and open the Industrial Development Corporation, the IDC Board meeting. So the Commission meeting is closed and the IDC meeting is open.
A motion to appoint the officers
banging
for
on
the
things.
2019 Port of Bellingham Industrial Development Corporation Board, or IDC.
Commissioners, historically, the IDC, which is our Industrial Development Corporation, the officers have mirrored the Port Commission with one exception, and that is the addition of a treasurer, which is required on the IDC, and that has been Tamara Sobjak. So if you're okay with the officers being the same for 2019, it would be Commissioner Bobby Briscoe would be the president of the IDC, Commissioner Ken Bell would be the vice president, and Commissioner Michael Shepard would be the secretary of the IDC, and Tamara Sobjak, our director of finance, would be the treasurer of the IDC.
Either of you see any reason to mess with that structure?
I do not.
I do not.
I do not either.
So a vote.
So I vote.
A motion to appoint the slate of officers for the 2019 Port of Bellingham Industrial Development Corporation Board, as stated.
All in favor? Aye. Aye. Unanimous?
Commissioners, the location, date, and time of regular IDC meetings are as needed, with the minimum amount being the one meeting a year where you approve the minutes from the prior year, which is the meeting we're in right now. So if we have a need for a meeting, then the staff will call that, and the IDC can meet.
I see no reason to change that either.
No, I'm good.
So the motion to establish the date, time, and location of IDC meetings for the 2019 calendar year to mirror the Port of Bellingham, and meetings to be held as needed.
Gentlemen, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Unanimous?
A motion to approve the minutes of the January 2nd, 2018 IDC meeting.
I'm pretty sure we can go forward with this without a discussion. Gentlemen, all in favor? Aye. Aye.
Great, thank you. And now a motion to authorize a 2019 budget for the Industrial Development Corporation totaling revenues of $6,125 and expenditures of $700 as outlined in the budget. Authorize the IDC treasurer to approve the distribution and payment of IDC funds in conjunction with this budget.
Tamara Sobczak, IDC Treasurer. The IDC budget's very minimal since there's really no activity in it. We have one revenue item, and that's the annual fee on the outstanding bonds that Hempler issued in 2006. And then the only expenses are the audit and the banking fees, and that's the extent of the budget.
Well, thank you for being so detailed in that assessment.
But I missed the joke.
Yeah.
I don't have an appropriate joke prepared.
Being appropriate.
Now we're curious.
After we shut off YouTube, then?
That never stopped our attorney.
Ooh.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, we're going to close the IDC meeting and reconvene the public meeting. We're back to the public meeting, and we've got a presentation on the waterfront by the newly titled.
This is that arch thing, right? This is the arch? And with his new title, oh, great one.
While you're getting that prepared, I just wanted to say what a joy it is to see Sylvia back in the office.
He's got a new title now.
Yeah, I'll take that to welcome Sylvia back. Sylvia's filling in temporarily for us, running our engineering department, some of our capital projects, just making sure they continue to move along.
Thank you. Glad to see you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Sylvia.
All right, thank you, Commissioners. Brian Gowron again. I think that we've covered a lot of the things. It was actually a very waterfront-heavy agenda, and actually a lot of the things I'm going to talk about here you've either already voted on or we've discussed at length, so hopefully we can get through this one fairly quick. Just as a reminder, this is one of our kind of overarching waterfront district updates. We try to do these regularly reoccurring. I think our last one was in August of 2018, and they're really for information purposes only. We try to get general direction from the commission. I do have a few things that we're working on that I'd like to, discuss with the commissioners to make sure we're moving in the right direction, kind of get the general head nod, preview the upcoming actions and where we're at, and then just kind of continuing this early and often exchange of information. So this one, I'm not going to go through very much detail because a lot of these things we'll hit on. I just kind of like to show there's a lot of moving parts in the waterfront district. We're underway with the sub-area plan amendment. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail here where we're at. The city's working on a significant number of projects. As you know, as you can see, there's kind of changing landscape down there every day. It looks a little bit different, a lot of progress. District energy we talked a lot about tonight, so that's great, good news. And we're hoping to have that, with that MOU approved, hope to continue to see that move forward. Harcourt is making significant progress, and we actually have Max Duffy and Tony Galena from Harcourt in the audience here today. We'll talk a little bit about Harcourt's ramping up their project management team here in Bellingham, which is great. And then we do have some other new kind of upcoming activities that with the approval of the 2019 budget, kind of where we're going on some of the waterfront district projects. So anytime, feel free to interrupt and address any questions you might have or comments as we move forward. So with the sub-area plan amendment, it has been a little bit quiet lately. A lot of staff work on the city side has been underway. Just as a reminder, we did submit the sub-area plan amendment application back in April of 2018. Hit the deadline for that. Got the Planning Commission to evaluate our submittal. They did recommend to the City Council that they docket that sub-area plan amendment for a city comp plan amendment. What that docketing does, the City Council then approved docketing. What that does is then allowed the city staff to start working on it. So all of that work up to that date was really just to say, does the city have the resources? Does this plan amendment warrant putting effort into it? And by docketing it, they said, yeah, this does warrant the work, and let's go ahead and assign staff to that. So since that point, the city staff has been working on evaluating our sub-area plan application. And then in the meantime, we've been working on that environmental impact statement addendum, which we just talked about previously, which we'll be putting out for public review and comment here in a moment. With all of those things kind of coming together, city staff is preparing a report to the Planning Commission. We'll issue the EIS addendum, and then we've scheduled tentatively the first Planning Commission hearing on the Sudbury Plan Amendment in February, likely to be on February 21st, from what I understand. And we'll get the word out on that here shortly. And this is just reviewing the graphic that shows with the fine print of what we think this process looks like. This is one that we developed. Commissioner Shepard recommended this early on in our Sudbury Plan application so the public could kind of know the process and where there's opportunities for public comment. The gold star here at the bottom, it kind of indicates about where we're at right now. This green line was the development of the EIS addendum, and that has to be finalized before the Planning Commission can hold their first public hearing. So we anticipate issuing that for public review and comment, hopefully December 19th, and that'll go for about a month. And then the Planning Commission hearing, this first public hearing will be held by the Planning Commission in February. You can see by the dates we're a little bit further behind than what we'd hoped to be. We'd hoped to be having this done, a few months back, that we'd be a little bit further ahead. But just with docketing, staff workload at the city as well as the port, finalizing the EIS, getting all those things to come together, just took a little bit longer than we'd hoped. But we really are on track. This doesn't push this out a year or anything like that. This is just a couple months delay, and then we'll definitely catch up on everything. So, and then this is available, on our Port of Bellingham website as well, if people want to find this document and look at it in a little more detail. So that's where we're at on the Sudbury Plan Amendment. We do hope to have that finalized and then adopted in 2019. Moving forward on some of the projects that are underway, the city and port have a significant number of projects that are ongoing. Granary Avenue and Laurel Street obviously is a huge undertaking. The city, as you see, every time you drive by there, there's new work being done. They're really essentially done with that first phase of the street that goes about down to, not all the way to Laurel, but a good chunk past the acid ball and past the Waypoint Park. And they've got the cycle track in for that section, the streets, the striping. They've got street trees that are being planted now, the rain gardens. Really, the only reason it's not open right now is because that interim parking lot, which is another thing we talked about earlier, is not constructed. They really couldn't have it open up to a dead end. Needed to have cars to be able to turn around, otherwise it could have been just stacked up and people trying to get out. So with the construction of our interim parking lot, which will allow circulation to flow through there, they'll open up that first phase of Granary Avenue. And then Laurel Avenue, the remainder of Laurel Street will be constructed and hopefully finished once the railroad crossing. That's the big slowdown right on that right now, is that they've got the majority of all of the utilities in, the paving's done, the curbs and gutters are in. They're really just waiting now for Burlington Northern, who has to actually do the installation of the new crossing at Laurel. They have scheduled that with BN, but I don't have a hard date right now on when that's going to happen. But they do anticipate that in the next few months, which really should kickstart the final phases of Laurel Street opening, hopefully in spring of 2019. So
I have a quick question on that. The traffic light on Roder, when is that due to become functional? Will that be in about the time the parking lot's in?
Yeah, they will activate that. We just talked to the city today about that. They will activate that once we're ready to open the parking lot, and that it's all live, it's ready to go. They'll need to do some preliminary outreach to folks to kind of let signal changes, to let people know that there's so they'll need enough foresight on when we're actually going to be done with the parking lot, which will allow them to get the word out that there's a new signal there, and they'll start activating it and start using it, just to get people used to that. But it's ready to go.
That's what the ticket guy was for. He gets people used to that.
So then, in addition to that, obviously Waypoint Park is open now and being heavily used. I mean, people love it. We've got a lot of really good feedback. The city has received a lot of positive feedback to that. And then, as we also heard, the district energy system is underway. We've got the MOU that was approved today, and we'll continue to move forward on that. The one other element that we'll be working on now that we have the Granary and Laurel Street preparing to be opened is to really ramp up our site safety and security measures. So we did some preliminary work around the tile tanks and the digesters with some fencing. We fenced off the backside of the access to the shipping terminal. But what we don't want to have, obviously, is, hey, welcome to our new waterfront. Here's razor wire fences on both sides of the street. So we're really going to be ramping up kind of things that we found that are problematic or hazards, and making sure that's made safe, and blocking off areas in ways that are aesthetically pleasing and that are not really a danger keep out sign. So we're working on that right now. We hope to have those kind of incrementally rolled out as we open up the space to the public. Some of Harcourt's projects, as I mentioned, they've got a new project management team. Max Duffy, who's here from Harcourt, you can feel free to call him up with any questions you might have. But they've really ramped up their presence here in Bellingham, which is great. Over the course of the development of the roads and infrastructure, as we know, it seemed like it was moving fairly slow, but the granary building and any new buildings down there didn't really have anything to connect to. There was no access, no roads. So with all of this stuff coming together right now, Harcourt's really starting to bring more and more personnel to Bellingham, establishing an office and leasing agents. They're establishing a new a Bellingham downtownwaterfront.com website, which has a lot more information about the site, as well as contact information for Harcourt. And they're going to have a much more significant presence here at Bellingham, which I think is really positive. What they've been working on, they do have significant work on the granary building. As you see when you drive by there, the annex is currently under construction. The steel has gone up, and their goal is hopefully by the end of this month is to have that all buttoned up and watertight, which allows the building to then be starting to work on tenant improvements. They're negotiating leases with a variety of different tenants right now, and they have some uses. They anticipate kind of a market space use on the ground floor, where a variety of different types of vendors, it can be everything from a long-term vendor to a day use, a pop-up week-long vendor, arts vendors, coffee shops, that sort of thing on the ground floor. Some office space, some kind of softer uses like yoga studios and those types of things as well. So they're working right now on leases for the granary building and anticipate, as well as restaurants on the annex. So a lot of stuff should be coming out here shortly on exactly what's going into the granary building.
Can I recommend, Mr. Duffy, that you look at an emergency care center somewhere in there, because when the pump track goes in, I'm just saying, I know some of the guys who use those pump tracks.
Yeah.
Some kind of 24-hour emergency care.
So you'll feel better using that track if they put one in the,
I just know some people.
feel safer?
Just saying.
A few other things they're working on right now. I have not heard about an urgent care facility down here, but that's not probably out of the question. They're continuing to work on the waterfront residential units, which the Port Commission has approved, and we had the sale of that almost 2 acres property on the waterfront. They revised some design. As you know, they switched architects and switched to a local architect, Zervis, which has been really positive. They've done a lot of great work. The city's enjoyed working with them. They're a great resource to have in town. Harcourt has spoken very highly about the work product that they're putting out. And they have now moved forward on the design review, and that's been finalized. They've gone through the design review process with the city, and now they're in for land use and building permits right now. Because of the location of these on the shoreline permitting process is a little bit longer than if you were just a couple hundred feet back from the shoreline. So there is a little bit more robust of a permitting process. I did talk to the Zervis folks today, and they're making good progress, though, with the city, and they're confident that they'll be in for building permits and starting construction, hopefully, in the spring of 2019, at the minimum of the foundation components, as they could then continue to build the, any specifics with the building department on the actual building permit itself. So they do hope to get under construction here in early 2019. Then a few other projects they've talked about, obviously the Gateway office building, which would be right across the street from the granary building. That's what we talked about, where we anticipate the permanent parking for granary building to go. They've developed some initial concepts, nothing that is finalized or ready to be shared from what I understand, but they are working on kind of an iconic Gateway office building at that intersection of the granary building, or the Granary Avenue and Roeder. We'll hear more about that here shortly, I'm sure, as they develop and refine those plans. And then there's still a lot of interest from Harcourt side of restarting the Board Mill Hotel project as well. So that will lead to a few more things here that we'll talk about here in a moment. So any questions on what's been happening to date? Okay. So moving forward, this is one where we're starting to talk about with the Board Mill Hotel, the sub-area plan adoption, and all the changes that we have foreseen, that we've been working on over the past year, is doing an amendment to the Master Development Agreement, which would be MDA Amendment number 4. We're just starting to kind of work on that with Harcourt to define the boundaries of what that amendment might look like. We've had amendments in the past which were very minor, which was like, oh, we'll move a line here to accommodate the park development. Oh, we've got a date that we need to push out by 6 months, we'll amend that. This is a more broad MDA amendment where we actually will do a larger scale boundary modification. We need to establish some building values for the board mill and the alcohol plant if they're going to be part of that MDA. Currently, we have a land value, but we don't have any building valuations. So that's something we'll have to update. Update the master schedule, the vision plan, and a few other things here.
So Brian, when you say building value, is that the cost, the value, the dollar amount that building is expected to be worth?
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, so we have a land value for purchasing, but if they're, we had not, other than the granary building, we hadn't anticipated that there would be any buildings because the board mill building was in Western's footprint, right?
Yeah.
So we didn't anticipate that would be part of Harcourt's, but now that they want that building, we need to establish what's the value of that structure. So this,
Seeing some of those guys in here will say lots, huh?
yeah, it's lots.
Good luck
By the moment.
Good luck finding a comparable.
That, Max, you got to take back that to Ireland. Lots.
Yeah, we are underway right now with appraisals for those, and that has been one of the challenges, is that how do you value these
And you
things?
get a comp on that,
Yeah,
right?
so what we've shown here, and because the biggest change obviously is the boundary of the master development agreement area. Currently they have about between 17 and 18 acres of property that are in this black and white configuration here. It fits with what the previous sub-area plan layout was, where we had a larger arterial that came off of Commercial Street that had the Commercial Street green that bisected the site, as well as this kind of notch out here, which was the Western Crossing 6 acres footprint. So a lot of that has changed or is underway with changing it right now with the sub-area plan amendment. So we do anticipate, in order to pull the board mill building into their MDA, we've got a draft configuration that we would recommend moving forward with in an MDA amendment. So this is the proposed layout that mirrors what the sub-area plan amendment would result in, as well as a few other components. So as you can see, the upper portion here along the waterway is still the same. That's the granary building and the waterfront residential units. That doesn't change. But because of the configuration of the park now coming through the middle portion of the site rather than coming off of Commercial Street and cutting through the middle portion this way, we would reconfigure the layout of the master development agreement here in the downtown core, as well as pulling the board mill building into the master development agreement and moving the Western Crossing footprint over into this red boxed area, which actually has already been accomplished. The commission already approved that a number of months ago. So this would be the reconfiguration, which still results in about 17.7 acres of property, which is comparable to what they currently have in their master development agreement. So pending some of the commission kind of head nod, this is the layout that we would propose to start negotiating with Harcourt on reconfiguring their master development agreement.
Could you just back up once? So that eastern boundary maintains at about the railroad tracks. Is that right there? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so this kind of mirrors the railroad track boundary, and and we've tried to keep it all in that same area. We're not pulling the Lignin building into it. As you can see in the current layout, the alcohol plant is already a part of the master development agreement area.
And so the Lignin building would remain out of the MDA, but within the boundary of the waterfront district as a whole.
That's correct, yes. Okay. And then just for comparison, this is one, we would bring this forward to the commission with much more detail, but we kind of wanted to get the initial feedback that you might have on this changing this layout. There's not a whole lot of flexibility because it's really just moving, similar to what the sub-area plan amendment, we're moving the park, so we're going to replace the park where it was with where we're proposing to have it, and we're going to pull the Western Crossing stuff out and put the board mill building in. That's really the only really main changes.
Except for the green creep out there by the water, it creeps towards the shipping. Can you take that green out of there for me?
Well, this one,
Yeah,
That's- yeah.
stop it, just stop it even with the red line there at the end of what's just kind of, yeah, there you go. Just
Yeah.
To the left, would you just erase the green?
yeah. Well, the only thing with that is that is part of the shoreline buffer. So really, it's all part of the area that couldn't be developed anyway. So we have committed to the city that we would be having a public access component there.
Okay, well, who's gonna mow that?
Well, maybe it doesn't have to be green. Maybe it could just be a gravel trail.
All right.
So any other questions or feedback on this? I mean, I think it's fairly straightforward, but I want to make sure you guys had a chance to look at it. A few other elements that might go into the master development agreement amendment are coordination on the parking garage access and Bay Street point. There's some complexities there with who would be building the parking garage. Currently, we anticipate it would be the city, but there would be probably need to have the flexibility to have buildings built on top of that. So that's something we just need to start to work through and work out, as well as just making sure we refine and kind of reinforce that our expectation to have a strong project management team commitment from both parties, which Harcourt's shown they're willing to do.
I have a question. You touched on the parking garage and building buildings above that.
Yep.
Now, I thought the reason for the garage being there was the outlook we had from the city through the design.
Well, it is, and that fits with what the plan has been, even in our city's, our kind of vision plan that we worked with Harcourt and the city on, is that there's an access point at Bay Street which drops down into a parking garage. We'd maintained a view corridor at that point, but on either side, where the parking garage would be under you, you could have building structures on top of the parking garage. But it would maintain all the view corridors that we've already established.
But the stuff that we've put forward in our meetings and stuff didn't have that building there, right? Or did it? It did? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that's consistent with yeah.
Okay, okay.
And I can maybe I'll send out individually to the commissioners just a little figure that shows that. I just didn't have prepared that one.
Yeah, remember, we're not filling the gap that's there. It wouldn't.
That's right.
So that, everything that could be built there was present in those drawings.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm good then. You don't have to say anything.
Okay. Yeah. It's just not something that was contemplated in the
Oh,
MDA.
it sounded like it was something new. And
No,
I'm going, wait a minute.
It wasn't something that was contemplated in the MDA though at this point. Yeah. Okay. Well, moving on then, just a few other things just to highlight. There's a lot of other ongoing work that I think was kind of exciting. Obviously, we are continuing to work with Ports America. I mean, just as a reminder, the waterfront district isn't just the downtown area. It's the marine trades, the shipping terminal, a variety of other things in there too. So we're continuing ongoing marketing of the BST. We obviously are trying to get new customers there through our Ports America agreement. Like I mentioned, we're looking at site safety and security as a key component for the next year. We want to continue to grow the marine trades area, working with all the marine trades tenants. Yes, Commissioner.
I just thought on the growing marine trends, today I drove, came down the road there, and I hadn't realized how many barges we've had there. I'd just like to point out that that's because of prior commission decisions and that redo the terminal there, our barging terminal, that it has really taken off, I think, much more than we ever anticipated at this point in time.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there's probably some exciting barge activity there when they were unloading those trains a few weeks back. That was pretty neat. The lay berthing of those large barges right now, I think, is it really shows that waterway can get full. But a lot of that is lay berths, from what I understand. But still, it's great to see active use there. Yeah, for sure. And with that in mind, one of the things I've also just completed was a GP Wharf planning charrette, as from the Ports Commission's direction in the budget. We've started to look at what are the potential uses of that large industrial wharf on the downtown waterfront side adjacent to the Harcourt's residential structures. We had a really great meeting with a bunch of different members of the community. It was facilitated by a local architect, Dave Christensen. Really just city staff was there, park staff, some marine trades folks. Harcourt attended that, some habitat-minded individuals. with resource agencies, that sort of thing, and really had a great discussion just a couple of weeks ago on what we potentially could do for a combined public access and habitat work, as well as facilitating or moving the barge activity that's on that side of the water. No conclusions came out of that. Right now, we're still working on a report from that. We'll report back to the commission once that's been compiled. It's really just a guidance kind of days worth of planning, which was kind of a fun activity to do. So I think there'll be some good work that comes out of that, though.
Question on moving the barge. I didn't quite catch what you said about moving the barge activity.
Well, we anticipate that over the long term, that as the downtown waterfront develops, that there is the potential to, make sure that that barge activity that is currently on both sides of the waterway is retained. But whether or not it is retained in its exact footprint right now, we wanted to be clear that the current uses is great, but as the kind of mixed use in the downtown kind of moves down the way that it's planned, that we want to be, looking at the active uses that are there right now, and if we can accommodate that in a different location, we want to be able to look at that.
And one of the things we've talked about there is, visitor moorage, direct seafood sales by the fishermen, and those would require floats off the GP wharf, which would then preclude barge activity in that specific area of the wharf. But we've had conversations as well about putting more pilings in along I guess it would be the southwest portion of where Colony Wharf is currently, so that they could put barges farther to the southwest end of the waterway, so near the SB.
Yeah, I think it's also a recreational access benefit to do some of that consolidation, so that folks who are putting in their kayaks and leaving the waterway have a easier time of navigating, especially if those barges are not quite so close to the park.
Yeah. But we were clear that for the interim and for the time being, that current use is great where it's at. There's no reason to try to move things around right now, but we want to look at the long-range planning to try to make sure we accommodate that, and we're not kicking people that are, or uses out.
Yeah.
Then a few other things that were kind of interesting is, as per the 2019 budget, we are focusing on some interim uses down there. Now that the site's getting ready to open up, the fences are going to be coming down, the roads are going to be open, and there's going to be a large 30 acres of gravel. Let's look at potentially trying to put that to use in a variety of different ways. So we've talked a lot about this construction of a pump track. We're underway with the design of that right now, where we could have a public access point, where we could have bicyclists that could use that amenity. We're also looking at working with the community on different ideas. We've already had a few proposals for kind of temporary concerts, art installations, food truck pop-up things, a whole variety of things. Harcourt's got some ideas as well. So we're really looking at encouraging and entertaining ideas for potential interim uses as the development occurs throughout that area.
Brian, for community organizations that are interested in proposing those, who's the best conduit?
Well, right now, myself and Mike Hogan have been kind of leading up those discussions. We've met with a few people already, and so yeah, if they want to come to either me or Mike Hogan, we'll meet with them and discuss their ideas and see how we can move things forward. We're really trying to say yes to things rather than go away. We really want to encourage uses down there.
Do we have power access in the middle of that gravel field?
Not a lot. The parking lot actually will have lights, and so we could maybe potentially tap into that. There is power access. That's going to be one of the things. For a temporary thing, you can easily do generators, depending on what kind of things you're looking for. If you're looking for permanent lighting, that's one thing. If you're looking for an event, that's a different thing.
What happened last time they put generators on the GP site?
Yeah.
Going back.
We ended up getting it.
What?
it shut down, and that's where we are today.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, be careful with those concerts, because there are some people out there that just have an aversion to concerts. These wide open spaces on the waterfront. I don't get it.
Okay, so moving on. The last thing on my agenda here is just to remind the commissioners that we also have a significant amount of environmental cleanup still to do. We are bringing forward at a meeting in January, as we mentioned, Commissioner Briscoe had a question at a recent meeting. We are going to be bringing forward some recommendations on the next phase of the Whatcom Waterway cleanup and the ASB. So that's another big step that we'll be bringing forward to the commission for discussion here in January. So, and with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Could you just reiterate the timeline for that decisions on the GP West?
On the ASB and the cleanup?
cleanup?
Yeah, so we'll be bringing forward to the commission at a meeting in January, kind of our work group has been internally working on approaches for the ASB, whether we do a partial fill, no fill, or full fill. We'll be bringing forward some of that discussion to the commission in January. If the commission gives us direction, then we can start working with the public agencies and Department of Ecology, other stakeholders on how to move that forward. So that'll be a long process to move that, to make that any significant changes that we have, but we need to get initial commission direction so we can start doing staff work on that. So that will be coming here next month.
And that's separate from the chlor-alkali plant cleanup, which is out for public comment again. Why is that out for public comment again?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I didn't go into much detail on the cleanup projects, but we do have a lot of moving parts on those as well. The chlor-alkali site, we got to the point where we had a final remedial investigation and feasibility study, so we had a final RIFS. The next step typically would have been to enter into a consent decree and then develop the engineering design report and move forward on those. Because of the way the MOTCA grants had changed over the past few years, we kind of have worked with ecology and have changed the legal mechanism on how we do the next step of work. And we've now, rather than ending to a consent decree, we are amending the agreed order to do the design and engineering. So that's a bit of a change. So we actually had to amend the agreed order that would then say, yes, this is the next step that we're going to do. That amendment has to go out for public review and comment. So that's what's out for comment right now. Then we'll initiate the development of the cleanup action plan and the engineering design report and all those different elements.
Okay.
So that's the reason that's out for comment now.
So are people getting a preferred cleanup option to comment on at this point?
That has been accomplished already. That was with the final,
That was the first
the RIFS.
phase.
Yep.
Okay.
So this is really just a legal document that says, and that's why there's not a whole lot attached to it. It just says, okay, we're agreeing to go forth and do some work of engineering and design. So it's not really an alternatives analysis or anything at that point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Oh, good.
I've got a couple.
Yep.
The Ports of America, when we approved the agreement, there was a marketing agreement and something to be done by the end of December.
That was one that I might defer to other folks to take. I don't have the specifics on that question.
And it is the end of December.
Yeah, Chris Clark.
Hey, Chris, thanks for hanging around. Say hi to Sylvia on your way by.
Good evening, Commissioners. Chris Clark. How could I answer your question about the marketing? Well, actually, we've been actively marketing the shipping terminal of Ports America since really since the day that was approved. And we've done marketing with them at various events like Break Bulk Houston, and we've had joint marketing meetings with certain customers and ship owners and operators. And so that's something that we're doing on a daily basis, and we're kind of divvying it up as far as who has the best lead, who has the closest connection. So it's something that it's actually quite intensive right now as far as the scale of the marketing is concerned. And the way the agreement works is that Ports America, it's kind of split. They give customers rates on unloading the cargo from the ship onto the dock into what they call a place of rest, and then we give customers rates on loading those cargoes into trucks. So, for example, one potential customer we have is called Cantac, and they're in Calgary. And so we're in the middle of discussions with them, and it's split up that way. We've given them the trucking rates, and Ports America's given them the rates to take the cargoes off the ships to the place of rest.
Anything promising?
Yeah, there's all sorts of promising cargoes out there, and actually it's something that kind of compounds itself because the more we peel away, the more we find. And some of the customers are people that Ports America has been in contact with in the past, and some are new people that we've just found out really in the last couple of weeks. And there's quite a few customers that are on the other side of the border
in Coquitlam and what is that place? Maple, what is it on the other side of the border? Maple Ridge. Yeah, we've had one there. I was speaking to one this afternoon. So there's a lot of companies up there that import pilings and pipes and that type of thing that are used for kind of the understructure of buildings, and that's several of those we've been speaking to, and actually we expect some of them to be coming down here in the new year. They're very interested in Bellingham, and so we expect to have several contingents come down within the first couple of weeks of January. And in those cases, what we do is we organize those meetings with Ports America where they'll be on the scene as well. So we'll show them around the terminal, and then if they want to talk about rates and that kind of thing right at the time, Ports America is there to do that.
Chris, if we have a shipping company that's going to utilize our free trade zone, is that typically going to be a ship comes in with cargo, drops it off in the free trade zone, and another ship takes it away to its final place of rest? Or is that typically a situation where it gets loaded onto trucks and those trucks depart and transported that way?
Onto trucks. Yeah, that's the way it would work. Yeah, with the free trade zone, you can leave a cargo there for more than 45 days. If you don't have the free trade zone, you have to take it out within 45 days with a bonded carrier who takes it out on what they call a T&E bond. And we've had requests from several customers to have the free trade zone so that they can have the flexibility of leaving it there beyond the 45 days. But we have to be careful because again, it's a situation where if we do get the cargoes we expect, we don't want people leaving them there for months on end either. So the way we're structuring that is that we give them free storage of X, and then after that, the rates for the storage escalate quite dramatically, because that's a problem they've had across the border at some of those facilities where people have left cargoes there for 6 months or so, and that really blocks out prospects for other things.
Because we don't have very much ground for storing people's stuff.
Well, fortunately, we have understandings with some of our other customers that are currently leasing space from us, like with McAmis, where if they're not using that property, we can use that. They're going to expect some kind of a break in their rent, but that's only understandable. We have a similar understanding with Tier as far as their property too. So both of those entities have been very straightforward as far as allowing us to use that if we need to.
And if Tier ended up being successful, is there a possibility that those cargoes would be loaded on rail as opposed to increasing more truck traffic?
Oh, Tier is all about rail.
Yeah.
That's what they want to do.
Yeah.
And they're in discussion now with BNSF, and they've been talking to BNSF in Seattle and Vancouver, Washington, but now they're talking to the main office in Fort Worth. And so they're really making a concerted effort to have that come together. And they were here in November, and they brought their engineer with them, the guy that they hired from Wilson Engineering in Houston. He was part of the group that came, and they gave us some designs. And so they're spending a lot of effort and funds on that project. So we do what we can as far as speaking to the railroad ourselves, because of course that would be fabulous if they succeeded.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Commissioners?
Yeah, I'd like to, Mr. Duffy, can you join us at the mic?
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I just wanted to get you off your chair.
Yeah.
No, I've got a question. So the residential units down there, one of the most common questions we get asked is, we know there's 77 units, correct?
Yes.
Can
Well,
you
in
tell
and
us what a
around.
high price is and a low price is on those units? Maybe what the average price is and maybe what the median price is on those units, would you expect?
Yes, I can. I'm just going to say that I'm an employee of Harcourt. I don't sit on the board, so I don't think it'd be proper for me to speak on the record about these types of things. What I would like to put on the record is, though, our appreciation with our working relationship with the port here, especially Rob, Mike, and Brian, and that I'm in town until the 20th next Thursday. So I'm happy to have any discussions with the commissioners about the project going forward.
Well, if you don't mind, could you go back and ask the appropriate people to get back to us? Because we get asked all the time. What
Yeah,
this
well,
might
of
be.
course, yeah.
I don't think the pricing's been established yet, is probably one of the problems. Floor plans are there, but cost of constructions haven't been finalized. I think you're going to see that come out at a much later time.
Yeah. Look, we've done our due diligence.
It's a beautiful project.
Yeah, it is, and absolutely. I hope my presence here is a show of our commitment that we are looking to ramp up operations and to deploy more resources going forward. And yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
You didn't promise the top floor to Vladimir Putin or anything, did you?
Everyone wants the top floor. You guys can have it if you want. I'll put that on the record.
officers, lighting up off of that one.
You know, the commissioners still don't have offices.
We're well aware, yeah.
I'm not touching that one. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for being
Thanks
here.
yeah, my
Welcome.
pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I have nothing more.
So Commissioners, the next thing up is other business. Before we do other business, there is a request to go into an executive session that wasn't scheduled to talk about some pending litigation regarding the I&J waterway. Hopefully we all have time to maybe carve out a half an hour and head upstairs after we get done with other business.
Exactly what I was hoping, yes. Agreed. And before we go to other business, I just want to make the announcements that this is the final Port Commission meeting for 2018. And the next meeting will be Tuesday, January 8th, 2019, with a new commission chair. And the complete schedule of the Port Commission meetings for 2019 has been posted on the Port website, so I want everybody to take a look at that. But this will be the final one for this year. And then I also want to announce that the Marina Advisory Committee, the next meeting for it is in January. It's in January 15th at the Harbor Center building. The Technical Airport Advisory Committee is also in January on the 24th in the GA conference room at the airport. And then the International Airport Advisory Committee will also be January 24th in the GA conference room at the Bellingham International Airport. So all of the meetings for the rest of the year are done. We will begin again anew next year. So with that, I'd like to go to other business. And if you guys would give me, I'd like to talk about the web lockers a little bit because we've had a couple of requests. So can we start with that?
Yep, sure.
And we've had two different phone calls this week on web lockers, so I'd like to address both of them in the public setting.
Yeah, I think one of those requests came from, and hopefully Alan Birdsall is here somewhere still.
There it is.
Nope, there is. So we've had two requests. One of them was from
Thanks, gentlemen.
Sound Diving, and the other, I think, was a recreational boat user. I think the Sound Diving probably has a pretty legitimate story. They're a water-dependent business, marine trades business. I think the recreational boater is probably the exact type of web blocker user we're trying to politely have him move his boat to elsewhere. Alan, did you want to add anything to that, or?
No, those are the recent ones that we know that have come through the commission. Staff has been taking a request for exceptions from different folks, all tending to be marine trades. Most of the recreational folks are willing to go. We've been getting quite a bit of response. We've been getting a lot of folks that have been getting their fish license and their fish tickets submitted based off the first and the second letter. I don't think we're going to see as many lockers open up as we had hoped, but we are getting a response. And we anticipate by, the end of December, we gave folks until December 28th on the second letter to get all their documentation for the proof of the ACF, active commercial fishing. And so once that happens, we'll have a much better idea and understanding where we are at with lockers, what kind of exceptions might be out there that we're going to pose to the commission, let you guys make that decision on who gets the exceptions and who doesn't, under certain considerations. And again, they would be all marine trades oriented. So that's where we're looking to go.
Yeah, I'd like to, maybe let's start with sound divers, and let's discuss that one first, if you guys, because I have a clear opinion on that.
Can I just, one thing, when we've talked to the folks, we said what we're going to try to do is make these exceptions, if they are, maybe at one time and not piecemeal as we go along, help keep things more clear and precise, but it's up to the commission.
Well, my question
do
to you
what you
then
do.
is, does that hamstring you at all with some evictions that are pending?
No.
Do you need an answer, or are you giving those people time until we come to that conclusion, which means January?
Yeah, I also talked to the folks with sound diving yesterday. Actually, no, it was this morning. Time's just flying, right? And I did let them know that if the decision was made not to make an exception, we're not going to give them 24 hours to get out. We'd still give them a reasonable amount of time, 30 days, 45 days, whatever it be. We'd still work with them. We're not going to just drop the hammer on them the next day and tell them they got to go.
Does that schedule suit you two?
Well, you haven't confused what sound diving's, what's going on there? I
You
mean,
looking at me?
do they have a locker now, or, I mean, what?
They have a locker now. They're a marine-dependent business that make active commercial business, from what I understand. It's an
They
active part
have
of
two
Harbor.
lockers. They run their business out of one locker, and the other locker is for storage.
They run their business out of one locker?
I believe so. Yep. it
They
serves as-
store their gear for their business out of the one locker, and then they do diving for vessels around, the community, the commercial fishing vessels, recreational vessels, and having storage near the harbor is really important to them to keep their business going.
But I'm a bit confused on what's the classification, we run our business out of the lockers at their office?
Well, I think when he said he runs his business out of it, he meant they frequently use one, taking gear back and forth to the water, and then the other one is more long-term storage where they access it less frequently. I was trying to explain the use, not necessarily I'm not sure exactly what their business is or what they do on a daily basis in their locker.
So you're aware of the two requests that we have on our plate. And both of them are looking for an answer right away because they want some certainty. Are there others in that same position that you know about?
Yes.
Oh, there are.
Yeah. Yeah, that have not raised to the elevation that the folks have called the commission or Rob, but we've been dealing with those. And it's things that have gone pretty consistent, again, with the marine trades and discussions that we've had, and that we would be looking to bring in that list all at one time. And there's not a lot of them. I mean, it's just a
How
few.
long has Sound Marine been in the lockers?
Sound diving?
Or excuse me, Sound Diving?
Sound diving. I don't know off the top of my head. That I'd have to go back and find out.
Yeah, I know Dave Cinco's had the company for a number of years, and then he's just got through selling the company to Ty, I believe his name is.
Yes.
Ty Campbell.
Yeah.
And it doesn't say in his letter how long.
And what they did, as far as I understand, is
You will when you're sitting here.
they made a legal transfer of the web locker ownership. That was part of the deal when they transferred the business. They transferred the web lockers as part of that business, and so we were brought in, which is different from many people who have had partners in subleases that haven't informed us and notified us of those changes or those partnerships.
Yeah, I believe they've done everything legally. I don't know the entire history. I know the current issue is that the commission directed staff to terminate agreements for anybody that was not an active commercial fisherman, and to open up some of the lockers. And then we have some marine trade issues that have come in, folks that, upland tenants, marine trades, and then some of these, and then with sound diving, they're not a tenant. They don't lease space from us, but they kind of fall in line with that marine trades. And that's where some of the exceptions were coming in that staff was going to bring to the commission for clarity. And it's up to the commission.
And what was the date of bringing that to the commission?
I was really looking forward to the second meeting in January to be able to bring that list, any policy changes that we're looking at, because at that time, we'll have an idea again at the end of December. We should have a good idea of what we have open. Just a very small window, though, between the end of December and January 8th to bring any real information to the commission.
So it'd be January 22nd.
You look like you're going to say something.
My assumption would be that we're gonna have another meeting, another discussion with the Working Waterfront Coalition, the Whatcom Fishermen's Association, and other lean forward, I'm sorry, other interested parties before we come with these, suggestions to us? Or not?
Yeah, no, when we met with...
Iron out some of the issues that I know are there.
When we met with the Commercial Fishermen Association folks 3 weeks ago, I believe we indicated that there might be a follow-up meeting after December 15th, and just to kind of see where things flushed out. I know they have gone through our list, and I understand they may have some recommendations, and I'm not sure what those are at this point.
Okay, so I would like the port staff, whomever that be, facilitate a meeting with those groups prior to the recommendations coming to the commission from staff. I would like to see that happen.
Yeah, we'll get something going maybe the week of January 7th. First week everyone's back, we'll get that group back together and start having those discussions. I do want to emphasize this commission decision, though, not a Working Waterfront Coalition or Commercial Fishermen Association.
No,
So
I
know
understand,
you know
I understand that, but I don't want there not to be a second meeting, because we've
Understood.
flushed out who can be there and who can't be there, and we all know that there's other extenuating circumstances that need to be dealt with, that do fall upon our active commercial fishermen.
Understood. We'll get that meeting put together.
And then my request is that somehow we ease the tension of the people who are in limbo, so that they understand that they're not going to be evicted sometime over Christmas. I would hate to see the Grinch show up, or even have that.
I think we've been giving that message to everyone pretty clearly, that if you fall on those gray lines, then we're going to give you some time. And even if the decision comes down against you, we're still going to give you time to move out of there. I think that message has been pretty
And we can
consistent.
communicate that as well. So that's fine with me to have that second week in January as being the time we bring it to the commission.
And we have had a couple of folks that are indicating that they are going to move out, but they've asked to be able to do that in spring, just for timing and getting family, staff around to do that. So we're working with them to make it reasonable for them.
These are appropriate growing pains, so.
Yeah, and I don't know, I know you're not looking for decisions here, but I think those outfits that are contributing productively to the local economy, who are utilizing those spaces, should continue to be able to have capacity to do that. You know, they're employing people, they're providing a service, they're providing positive economic revenue, and that's not the case with everyone down there. So, you know, I'd love to give them direction as soon as possible, so that they're able to keep their business operational and keep employing people and keep providing revenue.
And I share that sentiment. I think, especially when it comes to somebody like a Sound Diver, I think they provide a little bit of different diversity to that waterfront, and I'm supportive of that business going forward. And I don't know if we can officially send that message, but we certainly did it unofficially. All right, that's all I have. You got anything else for other business?
For other business, yes.
Walk. Here, move the mic up.
Boy, you must think I have a lot. We've touched on the GP Wharf thing a little bit this evening, and we've also touched on the pilings extensions on the ASB side. I would like to throw in there that I think we need to add some dolphins on the east side of the waterway as well, continuing from GP Wharf towards our Bellingham shipping terminal dock. Reason being is we've seen it growing as fast as it is, it's going to keep growing probably. As we gentrify the GP dock and move things to the south, we're going to have to accommodate what's being used now. So I would say while we're looking at least I would ask my fellow commissioners, while we're looking at the west side of those, extending the dolphin line out towards the ASB pond further, that we also look at doing so on the other side of the waterway too.
So in front of the log pond area?
Yes.
That may have some environmental considerations to it. We'll have to look at that.
On the ASB side,
On the,
log pond side.
Log pond side.
You're gonna, if you're gonna wanna take away the moorage that they're presently using now, some of it at the, which is what I'm hearing at the GP side, then we're gonna have to accommodate that usage somewhere else. So even though we're gonna extend on the other side, you know, basically what we're doing is moving what's being moored at their working area further south, so they have the working area open, plus they have the barge tying up area. So we're gonna need to extend that. But if we're gonna put in floats and such, and we're probably gonna cover half of that GP wharf doing that. And I know that at times when my meetings with Harcourt, the Harcourt folks that were here, they expressed having, like to have some of that activity remain on the southern end of that GP dock. We need to make sure that we don't take away the moorage that's needed, because we already need more. So if we move those barges down, we're gonna have to see if we can't accommodate towards the Bellingham Shipping Terminal Pier with some dolphins in it. And, you know, there may be something environmentally, but.
Well, yep, we can look into that and come back to you with some ideas.
I think we need to.
So just to be clear, we're wanting, because we've previously talked about putting them on the ASB side.
Correct.
And so this would be adding on the ASB side and then additionally adding more on the log pond side.
A couple things to think about here, and we'll look into the environmental matter and see what we can and can't do there. It has always been planned that the GP wharf was temporarily going to be used for barges, not permanently. The idea that the GP wharf even stayed is a new one. That's in the last several years, which we encourage. Staff supports that and likes that idea. But prior to that, it was a soft bank with no barge moorage at all. And the agreements with Colony Wharf, who make the revenue off this arrangement, have always been very short-term because of that, because we never thought that would stick around. I'm not sure, you know, the business case for putting more pilings in. The port gets very, very little revenue from these operations. Colony Wharf takes a majority of the revenue, and the port bears 100% of the expense of installing these infrastructures. So it's something to keep in mind as we're going.
That may have to change.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing is, it's not only Colony Wharf that concerns me, as our shipping terminal grows, you know, sometimes that pier isn't long, will not be long enough to accommodate what needs to go up against it. And if we do put those dolphins to the north, it will accommodate larger vessels or two vessels at our pier at certain times. So it's just not, to me, about extending for Colony Wharf. It's about extending our pier to the north if we need more face front to put a ship against. So there's multiple reasons to do that if we can do it.
There's no question pilings in that area would have been useful in the past for barges and for ships, no question.
If I may, just really quick, Commissioner, just jump in there. Yeah, I think that we've heard that comment loud and clear, and we're planning on looking at comprehensively at like what the business demand is right now, as well as when we're moving forward with the ASB and the Whatcom Waterway, because the Whatcom Waterway Phase 2 also includes other portions of the shipping terminal. The shipping terminal team is on our internal work group. So we'll take your comments, you know, and really try to come back when we come back. We'll be doing this iteratively as we look at the ASB, as we look at the Whatcom Waterway cleanup and the shipping terminal expansion and demand. So that's all one big package. So yeah, we'll definitely take all those things into consideration as we make recommendations to the commission. And yeah.
Okay, as long as I got you there, don't go away.
Yeah.
Uses in the log pond area. We've got water that's sitting there, and it's pretty, and it's nice, and it's clean. That's what it's supposed to be, but it's also supposed to be used as part of our port. So my question to you would be, is aquaculture a possibility in some of that area in the log pond?
The log pond right now, I mean, it is a designated, it's very shallow. So since we've capped that area, not only just by the nature of it, but then additional capping, it's really shallow. It is a designated habitat area. Aquaculture wouldn't necessarily be prohibited, I would think, whereas opposed to like dredging and installing new pilings and structures and that sort of thing, and since it's usually be something kind of temporary. That'd be something we'd have to explore with the resource agencies to see if that would be allowed. Right off the cuff, it is kind of a habitat designated area though for the most part. So with that, we just got to go into that with that in mind.
Yeah, so the western edge of that long pond would be deep enough for aquaculture to the inside, say the middle of the lineup of the inside of the GP dock south.
So I would like to see us, move forward looking into see whether we can or can't do that, because I think that may fall under some of our future plans that we may make, and certainly would be better to find out now as opposed to waiting 6-8 months when somebody's asking that question that wants to do that there and we can't give an answer. So
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we'll start looking into that just to see just generally speaking, what's the feasibility of something like that if the question came up.
okay, so thank you, Brian.
Yep.
So which resource agency controls the tideland there?
Well, that's an interesting one. I think that's actually port-owned property. It's not state-owned aquatic lands. But then anytime you're working in the water there, depending on I don't know enough about what the aquaculture scenario would look like, but if you're going to be installing something that, even like an anchor, that kind of thing, you might have to work with the Army Corps of Engineers. If you're working in DNR-owned land or state-owned land, you have to work with the Department of Natural Resources. Fish and Wildlife gets involved to make sure that you're not impacting any of the fish any of the fish in that area. So all the resource agencies, once you start working in the water, generally get pulled in.
Real simple then.
Right, slam dunk. Yeah.
Thank you, Brian. And I'm not bringing this up because you're here, Sylvia, but this was one of the things that we went through when you were here, and I'd like to. It's the road out to the Jorgensen Pier in Blaine. I know that we have done our due diligence and done our part, and we were ready to do something, but the other faction doesn't seem to be, that needs to help, doesn't seem to be, have the ability to do that and seem to want to let things sit. And everybody knows around here I like to let things sit, so. I would like to see us get pushing ahead somehow, figure out some way to get that road repaired, whether it's we do it and they help later, or we can get a grant to possibly help with part of this. I think we need to explore the avenues to get that thing done, or try to get it done sometime, if it's possible, in 2019. Whether that's possible, I don't know. Maybe, Sylvia, could you refresh my mind? Did we come up with a decisive decision on the design of that road going out there, or did we not?
Sylvia Goodwin, Interim Engineering Director now. As I recall, it was not, I know it's not in the 2019 budget. It's in an out year, and I think at this point it might be unfunded. It might be in 2020, but it's not in 2019. And yes, the city and the port did get together and make some agreements on the design of it, but it wasn't moved forward to the part where there's detailed designs. And I believe that the city also passed some kind of a tax that would be for transportation projects, and one of the projects listed on there was the pier. But that's all just my recollection after being on vacation. So why don't I look into it further and get back to you another meeting?
Yeah, we'll look into a couple things. One is where it sits on the city's calendar, and also where it sits on ours, because I'm not sure if it's in our 5-year plan, if it's unfunded, so we'll look into that and get back to you.
And I really want to take the temperature of the city of Blaine, because if we're going to go this solo, it's a whole different ballgame than if we've got cooperation with Blaine. Whole different game, so.
Well, I spoke with one of the local council people up there, and they don't really know too much about it. So it seemed like somewhere in the city management process, the ball's been dropped, dribbled over, and thrown in a waste can, and it's like it's not even happening. They didn't, they were under the impression that the port wasn't able to do their part at any point in time, and I'm like, no, I don't think that's the case. So there seems to be a lot of confusion in the city of Blaine, which sometimes doesn't surprise me, but I would like to try and get this thing ironed out so we know what direction we're taking with it. We've got an eyesore there. We've got a dock that's not accessible by a lot of elderly people because of what it is to get out there. And I think that it's also part of the economic driver for Blaine, for people to come there, to have something to come to, that pier and that. And it brings, business to town. And it's sitting there doing nothing, and I think we need to try and get it started to do something about it.
So is the primary concern vehicle access versus pedestrian access? Because right now it's open to pedestrian access.
Right, but you know, if you're 70 years old and you can't pack your stuff out there, it's unaccessible really to those elderly people, and it's kind of sad to me because we got a really nice pier there that we spent a lot of money on, and then we got a hunk of road that's what 250 feet long, maybe 300 feet long, that we can't seem to come to grips with getting fixed so we can drive a service vehicle out or an emergency vehicle, or the disabled and elderly people can get out to put their stuff there and take their vehicle out of there. So I would like to get us moving back on track with that again. It's kind of fallen off the cart, and I know we have a lot to do, and I know it's an expensive project, but we need to figure out somehow, some way to get it done, because I've been here 3 years and we've been talking about it, and we're still talking about it, and I'd like to see it happen.
In another 3 years, you will be one of those elderly people that.
So
That wasn't my ID you found, that was the other guy.
we will report back on what we find, but it's going to come down to, like every other capital project, what do you want to give up to do this one? And this is a really expensive project. What we found when we went down the road 3 years ago, it's a really expensive project to have vehicles go out there, and it's a really economical process to have pedestrians access it. So it's going to come down to how much do we want to pay per car to get people out there? And we'll bring you that math, and we'll bring you what we've done so far. I'm a bit surprised that the city doesn't think we've worked on this, because we did a lot of work on this, but.
Well, what's going on, Rob, is the new people that are coming to the city, the people that have left are not saying anything. So it's not, you know, they have the perception that it's the port's fault that this isn't done, or it's our problem, it's not being done. And I changed that perception a little bit the other night. I would say that I do recall in the designs that we looked at and this and that the single lane out and back for a disabled access or a person over a certain age like Commissioner Bell could take their stuff out and drop it off. And I do recall, unless I'm incorrect, that was considerably less money than trying to do a two-lane. And I personally, we don't need to do a two-lane as far as this commissioner is concerned, but we do need to have some kind of service access for our vehicles to service at, as well as an emergency aid unit to get out there to. So I think everybody that I've talked to is on board with a single lane access and not this access of many cars to that dock. I don't think we're there. You know, if we need the access and it is reasonably priced, we can do it. So, but anyways, I'd like to see us continue to keep pushing on that, and maybe we can push the other folks into doing their part so we can get it done.
So I guess the question will be, what is the cost difference between just fixing the road and having it be pedestrian access versus fixing the road for a single lane by permit or by special use access?
Yep, and we have that
I don't think
now.
anybody wants 2 lanes out there.
We'll bring you the work we've already done. We'll bring it back up in an upcoming commission meeting, and we can show you the exact numbers.
We'll pay proper attention to this. So, yeah, I look forward to that.
Other than that, right now, that's all I have.
My last one is on a little bit on Western Crossing. And I do want to make sure that we're moving forward a little bit more rapidly with some kind of a STEM type institution. And my goal for 2019 would be to make sure that we get Western and this development kind of moving forward. I felt 2018 was a year where it kind of stalled. So whatever we can do going forward, this is just my way of saying that would be my focus going into 2019, is to see what we can do with Western to move that development into the next phase. Because I think it'll help Harcourt as well as ourselves put a presence down there, and the more activity we get, the better. So that's.
I would concur with that. I think we need to get the rocket ship off the ground and get it aimed somewhere so that we aren't waiting 5 years for the planning part and the permit part and all the stuff that it takes forever to do. That we need to get something going, something figured out so that our developers know what's going to happen there as well.
Yeah, and I really appreciate Donna coming in and putting energy on this project for Western, but I would be happy, and I think we may have some input on providing them more direction on what we would specifically like to see. We've done a lot of waiting for Western to come to us with an idea. Largely, they have not, and that's, I think, frustrating, probably for everybody. And it might be useful for us to articulate some of that vision of what we would anticipate seeing and really be at least excited about. See what that produces.
And I kind of share a little bit of that take. I think some of the delay has been indecision about what they want to do and what can go down there. And I think if we can provide them with what we would like to see down there, that might help.
In my opinion, the biggest delay with Western Crossing getting down there is going to be their ability to get funding out of the state.
Absolutely.
And I don't believe Western has on their radar to even ask for the funding until 2021, 2022 biennium. So to the extent we want to see something earlier, I think that's where the pressure should be applied on getting them to up it in their legislative agenda. And we can certainly help there. We go to Olympia, very often as well, and we know the legislators too, so we can try and advocate for that. But certainly you providing your direction on what you want to see them put down there, and then us putting pressure on them to get this advanced in their legislative agenda will help.
And I would agree with my fellow commissioners. I think that's part of our job. That's why we're here. We're here to give direction to anybody in the county we can that will help. Whether they take it or not, that's another thing. But I concur. We need to form a plan and put it forward to them what we'd like to see there, and that maybe will help them get things going.
Anything else on other business? Okay, so before we close this meeting, I know we're going to not see each other for a while. My last parting comment is that this year exceeded my expectations for what I could have expected out of being a port commissioner. It is my first year, and it's been a joy to work with all of you this year. And I wish all of you the merriest of Christmases and the best of New Year, since we're probably not going to see each other. But this has really been a joy. I've really enjoyed working with you, Michael, and with you, Bobby. Rob, you're the best executive director in the state. And Frank is the best-looking attorney.
Now we know you've gone off the rails.
But I want to close this year by saying that this has been a real joy, and you've really exceeded my expectations. We've got the best staff. Shirley, you're amazing. All of you, thank you very much for a fun year.
And I'd just like to say that the two of you have done much better than I anticipated, and I really like working with you. It's been a pleasure, and it will continue for quite a while, I hope. With that, I'd just like to say that I have decided to try and sit here another 4 years after next year, if I can. So.
Because you like us so much?
That's it, can't go. And Frank, sooner or later, the guy's looks has got to rub off on us.
No, you just got to keep looking. You just can't not take your eyes off it.
It's the hairstyle I want.
Unless you have anything else, I'm going to close this meeting of the Port of Bellingham. We're going to now reconvene into executive session to discuss litigious matters.
If I can help you, Commissioners.